All right. So welcome. What were you gonna say, Michael?
Oh, you know what I'm gonna say. Digging up. Look at that. Look at little Mikey.
Oh, did you see it?
Yeah. Look at little Dave.
Oh, you just saw. Yeah, you got that on the screen. All right. Yeah, I actually gotta make that text go away. Everything is in order now, so we can make that go away. What's up, everybody in the chat? Welcome. This is not... Okay, listen, I was going to do two things, and I decided against them. And so I'm going to tell you what I was going to do. One was I was going to use a different opening song. I'm still divided between like 6 songs, though, and so I just went with the good old-fashioned monks. But, yeah, this is a new year. I was going to have a lot of new things going on. Nothing you see right now is permanent, but it's all a part of the bigger picture. And so, welcome. So, Mikey, how you doing?
I am not dead from COVID.
Unlike everyone else. You know, actually, so this is, I was going to say something about that. A lot of people are joining sick right now. Sick, tired. Hey, get that person out of here, Swole. Banhammer. Sorry. So, that anybody who comes in with a name like that, saying stuff like that, get rid of them. Anyway, we get troll spammed now, apparently. But what was I going to say? What was I talking about? COVID. So Omicron hit almost everybody I knew in like a week, and you were one of them. You and your mom both.
I apologize if I end up coughing through half of this, because I'm well, tested negative, but the cough has lingered.
Don't worry, nobody can catch it through the internet. At least we think. That might be actually why everyone's like, I'm triple. I've got all 3 shots, and I've been hiding out at home, and I wash my hands every 3 minutes, and I still caught COVID. And it's like, well, maybe you got it through Zoom. Did you ever think about that? Maybe it comes through Microsoft. Who knows?
A viral virus.
Yeah. But we just had our own little scare, and my partner Anne might have it. And we'll know.
Great.
She's gonna figure that out. We'll know soon. But yeah, are you still in brain fog?
Me?
Yeah.
No, I was, but I'm pretty much out of it now.
Well, that's good. So let's do a couple of, things about the, for the good of the order, I guess. Just a couple things setting up here, folks. So normally when we've done these lecture interviews, it's been me interviewing Mikey. Today, the tables are turned.
Roles have been reversed.
The roles have been reversed. Any other metaphor you want to use for flipping the script? So, Anne's in the chat. Welcome. She thinks she's good. That's good.
Anne?
That's good to hear. Yeah, so who we got here? We got Swole. We got Anne. We've got Izul. Izul says, "Plebe, it's never a problem. People come to these streams to learn, not to appreciate technical literacy." So for anyone just joining or hearing this in the future, the stream was a half hour late because of technical difficulties. I think technical literacy is knowing how to navigate the inevitable difficulties that come, not about not having difficulties. So I would call myself more literate than your average. But the difference between me and a professional producer is the professional producer is paid hopefully a living wage to be able to focus on helping someone else do the setup. And I would love to have a dedicated helper. I would love that more than anything. But, here I am, DIY, till I die. So now that we're going, let's get going. So
okay. Oh, hold on.
Yeah.
So flip the script here. I want to do a kind of introduction. And so here's the situation. I've known about the work Dave's been doing has it been over a year now that you've been devoting your studies to critique of political economy? Because you've been focused on it for a long time now.
That's a hard question. Because
In a sense, you've been focused on it for 5 years or something, but you went more extreme with the study of it.
Yeah,
in the last, I'd say, year.
Yeah, there was that realization that every time I come back to something, I go deeper. One of the things that really sped stuff up was that books like the one that I'm holding right here on camera, Time, Labor, and Social Domination, books like this were piling up on my to-do list, and the more I had piling up, the more overwhelmed and crushed I felt when I wasn't getting to it. And with quarantine, lockdowns, where I was at, and I was on a 2-week quarantine, pretty depressed and isolated, not really safe or in a reliable situation, and I couldn't focus on any of the readings that I need to be doing for my literature review for my book. And so that was when I first started listening to difficult books with a robot reader. And then it was kind of just an experiment, because I was like, well, I'm going to forcibly inject something into my dumb, sad brain, because I was like not doing anything anyway. And then I didn't really think I got much out of listening to any of the stuff that I listened to until like a few months later when I went back over some of it, and then I realized I'd gotten more out of it than I thought. And so I just, ever since then, I've been picking up steam. But the word focus makes things hard, because I can't have only one research thread that I'm pursuing at a time, or I get the books confused. So I was trying to like steelman conservatism with some modern conservative books or whatever, and I read 3 books by different authors in the same week, and then I couldn't tell the difference between who was who and what was what, who said what, because it was like while I was working, I was chainsawing and listening on my headphones, these ones, and I was just like, it's just a big blob. So basically I have to, if I'm working through something that's doing critique of political economy, I have to switch that up by doing something else. And I
need the contrast.
Yeah, and so I've been kind of bouncing back and forth between a few things, but CPE has been taking over, and I felt like the last 6 months was a sort of crisis of like, I don't know anything. I need to know how to be able to like talk about this field, or I don't even know if it should be called a field. It's a critique of a field, but this approach has a lot of standpoints, perspectives, thinkers, positions that are sometimes mutually exclusive, sometimes fundamentally antagonistic, yet they share certain fundamental presuppositions. Some of it's just dressed up in rhetoric and bullshit. Whereas sometimes that rhetoric is couched in, grains of truth and really important insights. And so, but feeling so overwhelmed and in over my head, I was like, well, I need to have my fundamental questions, values, and develop a sort of method for approaching all of this. And so right now, what we have here is just kind of really me, where I'm finally able to kind of articulate what I've been sort of muddling myself through for the last.
Because as I've told you, I mean, you've leveled up, and that's why I've been wanting you to do this. And when I talk to you, you've made so many connections and everything, not just within the tradition of Marxism itself, but connecting it to Austrian economics and Keynesian economics and
MMT,
media theory, and all that. Right? You've just leveled up to a point where you've become a different thinker, and that's what I've been saying is like, okay, I wanted to do this, so you can do a kind of introduction and summary of not like a completed work, but where you're headed in your philosophical trajectory. And I said to you before that one of the things that you can do is you can explain, to put it like this, you can explain what's going on behind the scenes in various forms of leftist thought. And what I mean by that is that let's get some context here. For me, I never got to go to university, not for real. I took, classes at community college, but I never got tapped into like the types of leftisms you encounter on university campus.
Oh, thank God.
And well, okay. And so I've never been in the academic setting with leftists, and I've never been in activist settings either. So I'm a leftist, but I'm outside of those circles. And you, on the other hand, have been totally submerged in those circles before.
Yeah.
And so the thing is, right, it's like with different denominations of Christianity. You can read a book and it can explain to you the differences in, this is the Pentecostals, this is the Baptists, this is the Catholics, right? But as somebody who was, a born-again Christian at one point in my life, heavily involved at the church, there's the ways in which these different groups relate to each other, concretely in real life, and you're not going to get any of that from reading a book.
Right.
And so I think that especially, after the influence of the Great Recession and then Bernie Sanders, how so many people have turned to the left in various ways, and yet they're not part of these the academic circles or the activist circles. And I think that's where a lot of confusion comes into play for a lot of people, where they don't get what's going on in those circles and how the different types of leftists relate to each other.
I hate it.
Right, but you get, the Trotskyists and the anarchists and the Marxist-Leninists and all that, right? And so,
and the Social Democrats and the Bernistas, yeah.
And so that's the thing, right? Like that's, I think, another important way of introducing this material for people, is introducing it from that perspective of here's what goes on behind the scenes, in the actual interactions with various leftists and stuff. So that's another thing I think you can help with here.
So yeah, and I hadn't really thought about this too much in those terms, so I'm glad you bring that up. I basically have to talk about, because I should preface this all by just saying that the people joining me right now are mostly not leftists. Maybe like a year and a half ago or a year ago, it would have been mostly leftists. But I've not been current with the news, doing hot takes very often, and dropping, relevant, current, timely types of videos. And I've gotten out, I've not really spent much time responding to people who do. And because these social networks, as they're called, and the whole influencer sphere is kind of built around, you got to kind of find your clique, you got to build up a sort of network that you follow these people, they follow you, you collaborate together. I've not been collaborating much. I've probably collaborated with you and Swole more than anyone else besides Astrid, and none of you are in that scene. And so we're kind of doing our own thing over here.
Right. Even when I call myself a leftist, for you, it means something different than what the majority of people you've interacted with concretely, they call themselves left. But for you, there's a big difference.
Yeah. And Watcher asks a really good question and says, how do you know if they are not leftists? There's two ways. First is because if there are people whose fundamental identity is being a leftist, and that is defined as being a part of a movement that they believe is real, they might just be delusional. And so they're not actually leftists, they're just delusional. But then I believe that you have people who are engaged in the work that is continuing the work that was historically attributed to the left, and that is fighting for working people to have more time in their day, to have safety and respect in their workplaces, to have representation at every level of management and stuff. We can talk about the critiques of these things, but there's various kinds of work from more radical and revolutionary types to more reformist types, but doing the work and having an identity are not the same. If they do, and if they are, then that's fine. And I don't want to be a gatekeeping, purity testing like person here who's saying, well, you're not that, well, you're not what you say you are. But I am going through a phase right now, and we'll be talking about this, a sort of moratorium where I am suspending my assumptions about the definitions of things, what they mean, because a lot of these words mean different things to different people. And so I said that's one. The other reason, Watcher, is because I've, in the last year and a half, been doing my utmost to cultivate what I call IRL relationships. And so it doesn't mean that like I don't have like great friends who are like primarily online friends. But my not collaborating with online influencers time was time spent getting to know people that I've known for a long time in deeper ways, but also forcing myself outside of my comfort zone and associating with people who are friends of friends, and making a really big effort to do that. And so you can kind of see the spectrum of craziness that and just like what that's like if you want to check out the People in Our Lives podcast I've been doing with Astrid. But those people watch my content, and some of them are definitely leftists, and they definitely do the work. Gerald Smith's a good example of that. I need to talk to him soon. But there's a lot of others who might be very much like normie Democrats, normie Republicans, or very, very ideological, reactivist types. And then we've also, and so when I say normie, normally, just to clarify, a normie is two things for me and Mikey. Okay, a normie is a person who's not into the shit that we're into. That's the first definition that everybody uses. Everybody online is niche in some.
Restate that because you cut out.
Okay.
Just that.
Yeah.
Definition.
Yeah. So for me, Mikey, I was saying most people. So I think the way that the word is normally used is that people who are not into the niche shit that we are normies. And so because the game comes out of, I mean, the term comes out of gamers, like calling non-gamers normies, but that was a resuscitation of the term. The term originally comes from the 60s and was used with two other words. There were normies, sociis, and fringe kids. And so what has happened is any kind of fringe kid online finds their niche, right? And then calls everyone else normies. But people who don't want to be seen as normies and who want the approval of those fringe kids are sociis. They're socialites. And they'll come in and they try to play the game. And it's okay. They're all right. But they must have gotten bored with their fraternity or their sorority, or maybe they don't see any upward mobility in their political system where they're at. But that's the kinds of people that they usually are. But they also like to take over movements and co-opt power and appropriate radical sounding rhetoric, and whether that's pro or against whatever is seen as social justice in the moment, there's this huge gap between doing and simulating. I don't know, that's kind of what I was getting to. But the whole thing about like whether the left is real or not, that's kind of like something that we'll get into. I basically have to talk about, because I kind of came into this conversation mainly thinking about Marx, and I'm going to put it up on the screen. This is the thumbnail, and so I'll put our little NSP Presents thing down because I still like it. But no, it's too small. I'll just put it behind. Okay, so if you've got eyes on screen, if you don't have eyes on screen, what I'm doing is I'm putting up the thumbnail. The thumbnail has Marx with sunglasses, the meme sunglasses on. He's up in the top left corner. It says, NSP Presents Me and Mikey Talking Marxisms, Revolution Culture, and CPE. So we'll get into the difference between those three things. And then it has a lot of people. I don't know, do you recognize any of these people, Michael?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we got Zizek near the middle. We got Bourdieu. We got Baudrillard now. Um,
He says that because I kept forgetting to put Baudrillard on this.
Wait,
Yeah.
hold on. Is Baudrillard in this one, or do you have the right one? Because I know he was in. I don't.
I think I fucked up.
Yeah, I think you got the wrong one. Anyway, okay, the other one has Baudrillard. There's Mark Fisher. There's Althusser, Mao.
I fixed it.
Che Guevara.
I fixed it.
That's it. Okay. Levinas, Spivak.
So do you find that? Do you find that strange that I have Levinas up there?
No, because I think there's a way to read Levinas along Marxist lines, which is to say that if you have the ethical relation to the other, there's a sort of duty. I mean, and this is how you would personally interpret it. Like, there's an ethical duty towards the other to, if you can't guarantee, at least fight for their time, energy.
Yes. Yeah, there's that. And there's also that I kind of see these as all. So something that I found really helpful was I think Martin J is the name of this author who wrote Totality, Marxism and Totality. Now we were talking last week, and I was talking about something Pistone had said about Lukács, a couple of the people that are in this image, and you had said, I don't get what everybody's problem with totality is and blah de blah, and I was like, oh well, he wasn't actually using it in that same way that like Levinas uses it and blah blah blah, and then after saying that, I had to check myself and think about it, and I went and I double checked, and so
I have that book sitting here. I've never gotten around to reading it, but
it's really great. I really love it. I don't know if so it's so early into the game for me that I can just love someone for being clear and helpful,
right, yeah,
and I can love someone for being clear and helpful, and I'll probably realize later that I have a huge problem with the way they misinterpreted something or whatever, you know.
But the point is, you and I have discussed this before, that the Marxists have a tendency to be very clunky in how they write, and it can be an obstacle to having comprehension and to even want to keep reading. Right.
And so I want to.
Marx himself wasn't like that. He was a great writer, but
well,
other thinkers in the tradition just bombard you with the terms, and it's dizzying.
True. Oh my God! Watcher said, "Where's Hassan?" Oh my God! I should have put Hassan and Vosh and Thought Thought Slime out there. Yeah, that would have been funny. I don't know about existing people. I like dead ones because people have had enough time to. The thing about dead people is that people have had enough time to digest what they've said, and then like the people who did the work can have like their principled debates. Like this debate that's been happening between Michael Roberts and David Harvey, a couple of people that probably should be up there. They're having this debate through articles that they've been writing for the last few years about whether the labor theory of value is real or not, or sorry, if Marx subscribes to the labor theory of value. And most people just off the top of their head go, well, yeah, duh, of course he does. Well, not.
But he's also critiquing political economy on its basic assumptions.
Right. Exactly. And so just because he talks about the labor theory of value in a way that Ricardo or Smith would probably approve of in the first few chapters of Capital doesn't mean that that is actually what he's doing with that project, because I'm going to hold it up for everybody so you can see. This is
saying, like, if we take you at your word, here's the deadlocks you run into.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Exactly. Because it's
immanent critique.
It's immanent critique, right. And so the stack of books I have under my chin here, very fat stack, is like one that I'm committed to like understanding eventually. And so I've been working on it. But, it's like there's 3 volumes of Capital. There's 4 if you count Kotsky's one on surplus value. And then there's the Grundrisse that I'm also holding, which was his rough sketch of the whole project early on. That was a lot more Hegelian in its form. And then he kind of... it was like his notes to himself before getting going, and he starts and stops multiple times. Like, he's going to go at it this way, then he's going to go at it that way. Like, he starts by being like, all right, so the main four categories of political economy are production, exchange, distribution, and consumption. And then he's like, okay, and so, through John Stuart Mill, we see that each one of these is its own sphere of economics, and that they all are separate, and they work in this sort of this direction. There's this flow to it. And then he's like, okay, but actually there's consumption in production, there's consumption in distribution, and he just sits there and he just does, like, it's like Derrida. He's just doing deconstruction. And
getting to the point that you cannot separate these spheres.
Right.
You can't isolate them like that and do them justice theoretically.
Right. And so Capital could have started out like that, but instead it started out the way it does, focusing on the commodity form, and then on the difference between use value and exchange value. And he thought that's the perfect starting point for unfolding the whole system. And we could get into all that stuff later, but I want to tie together a few loose threads that we have going right now. There's the one on totality and Levinas. There's the one on the left. And so the thing I want to say about the left is that when I am so everyone coming to this has their own background and where they're coming from. Where I'm coming into this, I guess I'll just out myself. I was an apolitical wannabe normie for several years, though I had a lot of unexamined presuppositions and stuff, and I avoided debate and confrontation and such. That was more during my music scene party years, and then just being a regular worker and killing time with friends on the weekend was pretty much my whole life, consuming music. And then I started getting into stuff like, I don't know, videos, conspiracy theory videos. Zeitgeist is a really popular one for a little while back in the day. Did you ever see that one, Mikey?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Okay, well, there was Zeitgeist 1, 2, and 3. And, I mean, it's probably just Russian, propaganda. I mean, dead ass. I mean, it actually probably is. Who knows? I mean, I know that these people go on Russia Today all the time, and people say that kind of thing. It doesn't matter if it's true or not, because there's what the value that whole thing had for me was just kind of like, it was like the red pilling experience people talk about. But for me, it was like just realizing I'd never thought about anything I took to be true from a different perspective. That was the fundamental realization. And so when you first get a different perspective that makes more sense than the mainstream narrative, then that instantly becomes the literal truth. It becomes the best perspective. It becomes everything that matters.
See, and that's why becoming a born-again Christian, that it's tapped into an underlying form, and the Christianity is just the content, but the content can vary in the born-again experience. Yeah.
Watcher said, I remember Zeitgeist being a bit esoteric. I mean, the first 12 minutes is about how actually Christianity, almost all of its mythic tropes or archetypes are recycled appropriations from sun god cults throughout history, from all kinds of other religions that include things like virgin birth and such like that, and that there's just always been these sort of sun god cults of rulers that use some kind of popular religion to get people to go along with their basic secret religion. And so, but it was the drawing the connections between Christianity and all of these other traditions that I'd never thought about or researched that was mind-blowing. Then it gets into 9/11 stuff, and then if you keep watching the other installments in the series, and I'm not promoting this right now, I don't think you should go watch it like it's important homework, but I'm trying to give you a sense of where I'm coming from. And so there was the thing that hit me the most. There's like a bunch of stuff on anti-imperialism that was very eye-opening. Like, that's when I first saw the images that Private Manning put out onto WikiLeaks the video footage of U.S. helicopters machine gunning down journalists who were just walking along with cameras. There were, and Chelsea Manning spent a long time in solitary confinement for that sacrifice to get those images to us, and those images were powerful, and that's why they punished her. And that's why they punish Snowden as well, is because they don't mind if we're left or right. They don't mind if we're left or right at all. But imperialism is off the table. They don't want us talking about it. They don't want us thinking about it. And insofar as it gets talked about or thought about, it better just be as like a sort of self-deprecating, IMF pandering or subscribing type of NPR listener who has like a guilt complex and thinks they can make up for their placement in the hierarchy by, talking about their privilege, and then taking it even further by trying to trigger, regular workers by talking about how corrupt our country is. And so the whole thing kind of gets, there's a way that very, very privileged people can kind of latch onto an anti-imperialist discourse that is either conservative, libertarian, isolationist in its rhetoric, while at the same time still being hawkish anyway. Or on the other side is globalist by nationalist standards. I mean, I'm not going to say that they're actually globalists, but they are the IMF and the World Bank and the Davos elite. And that's not fake. I mean, it's real. And the only ways that we get to talk about these two kinds of groups that I'm describing is with kind of prepackaged interpretations, articulations, and frames that were meant to make it so that we don't focus on what really matters. That's where I'm coming from right now. That's my assumptions that I'm working with right now. But the whole anti-imperialism pill hit me then. And so I was a little anti-American for a while. Like, just anti-America. Like, when I say for a while, I mean like probably like 8 years. And that was the beginning of that, because you do the whole... There's the author of The Economic Hitman getting interviewed in those documentaries. Anyway, finally, the big one, and I'm going to put this up on screen because this is fun. And, normally I don't really talk so much about my history, but this is something that I haven't shown people. And so since we're doing it anyway, let's do it. I'm going to put on the screen the Venus Project just so people can see what a sucker I was. Oh, great. Now I'm showing everybody my Facebook. Let's get off of that. Let's get off of Facebook. Why are you even on Facebook? Here we go. I've got problems. Hold on. Internet, stop. There's a piece of software that I was using, and now it's glitching out because I didn't pay for the subscription version of it. I need to just uninstall it. So let's see. YouTube. Let's pull up Venus Project. I will describe it to people who don't have eyes on the screen. But yeah, there's this guy named Jacques Fresco. Actually, hell, let's watch this little trailer. Michael, there will be a slight delay for you. You will first hear it probably over the microphone through the PC audio, and then but you should be able to mute yourself and then start playing the actual video, and then you'll catch up with it in a second. You just won't be able to react live to it because there's like a 12-second lag. So, all right.
I'm muting now.
All right. Okay, so what we're about to see, I'll just say it. It's kind of utopian, all right? But it also gets you thinking, and so it's probably worthwhile. So here we go.
The Venus Project is a veritable blueprint for the genesis of a new world civilization based on human concern and environmental reclamation. It proposes a holistic social design in which automation and technology would be intelligently integrated to maximize the quality of life rather than simply profits.
Undesirable behaviors are products of long exposure to detrimental environments. If we wish to surpass the limitations of our present-day society, such as war, hunger, poverty, and bigotry, We need to make changes and arrange society very differently. Most of our problems today are technical, but we still look for solutions through political means, in a monetary system.
We have the resources. Money is an interference because it limits our ability and it limits our dreams.
Modern society has access to highly advanced technologies and can make available food, clothing, housing, medical care, a relevant educational system, and at the same time develop a limitless supply of renewable, clean energy such as geothermal, tidal, solar, wind, and more.
The solutions lie in the intelligent and humane application of science and technology, and more appropriate resource management in order to supply goods and services to everyone equitably, enabling the entire global population a very high standard of living.
We don't have enough money to accomplish this, but we do have enough resources. If we initiate what Jacques Fresco calls a resource-based economy, this is where all goods and services are available to everyone without money, credit, barter, or servitude of any kind. For this to be attained, all resources must be declared as the common heritage of all the Earth's people.
Imagine the possibilities of an unprecedented mobilization of scientific and technical alliances toward problem solving without the interference of money or politics to initiate global unification and restoration.
The Venus Project would start with a systems approach to city design using highly effective construction methods, emphasizing the conservation of resources.
The first city would be a huge research center, making automated systems for the next city. It would be a place where we would disseminate information as to what sustainability really means for the future.
The aim of the city is to constantly maximize existing...
You see that train there? They call it the hype. It was called the Hyperloop or something. But when they were talking about it in the documentary, they were like, this thing could run on like almost no energy, and it would be 3 times as fast and efficient. But the reason they don't want us to have it is because they want us buying cars. And I was like, son of a bitch, are you fucking kidding me?
It's pure ideology.
Is to constantly maximize existing and future technologies with the sole purpose of enhancing all human life and protecting the environment.
The society I'm talking about is global cooperation, where all the nations work toward improving the lot of humankind. Now, why do that? Because the smarter people are, the richer and more secure everybody is.
We have the tools at hand to design and build a future that is worthy of the human potential. It is imperative that we continue the process of social experimentation in order to transcend our present limitations and truly create the beginning of a civilized age.
I'll let it finish. I don't want to let it finish. All right, you get the idea. I just want to get back to it. So Fresco's funny guy. In the trailer that I thought I was going to show you, he like turns to the camera and he's all, "This shit's gotta go." And I remember just being like, I like this old man. And so this old man's spent, I mean, they play him up like he's a child prodigy who was playing with, you know, he was doing engineering as like a 10-year-old and speaking multiple languages but he wants non-political, technological solutions to all of our problems. And
well, I mean, to me, that just immediately red flags me, of course, because I don't think we're going to do this without politics at all. I think I mean, the type of, we can revolutionize society without it being political, except, I mean, the problem is it's this political that implements structural policies. And like, I don't think we're doing this without politics. And the other one where she talks about like bad or self-destructive behavior or destructive behavior is the result of one's environment. And now you already know me as a psychoanalytic thinker, like, no, death drive is internal to us. Like, you're not getting rid of that either.
Yeah.
And it's not a product of just the environment, the structure of the world. No, our very libidinal economy enjoys self-destructive behavior, and so that's not going anywhere either. So,
well,
what makes it utopian, I guess.
But Mikey, the structures make them that way. So if you abolish the structures, then the flowers of their inner humanity will bloom, and everyone can just come out and hold hands, and sing, and dance. After they get one last big jab in at whoever the political people are that they hate currently, right? And that's
here's the thing. Like jouissance, or like, not to go off on this tangent, but just enjoyment is gained through prohibition. And I don't care what kind of society it is. Any type of society is going to implement certain prohibitions, limitations, etc. on your behavior. And the very fact that line is set up establishes this circuit of enjoyment in us that we're always seeking to transgress, or, you know, whether it be in fantasy or whether it just be in our everyday forms of enjoyment, we're not getting rid of that. And so that's, to me, where they're presupposing, there's a good human nature and the shitty aspects of society make us bad. And I'm not even saying death drive is bad. It also can be the source of our freedom. I'm just saying that some sort of antagonistic, or a society without antagonism or conflict or friction, tension, that's not happening. And so that's where I see the issue with utopianism. To me, is the view that we can have a society without any sort of intrinsic contradictions or deadlocks. And I don't see any reason to think that's possible when it's never existed.
Yeah. And so,
I mean, that's what the Lacanian real is, right? The Lacanian real is a twist or a deadlock in the symbolic. And I mean, that's the Lacanian point, is that every symbolic order has these built-in entanglements, deadlocks, knots, whatever we want to call them, but points of contradiction, points of conflict, points of inconsistency,
Michael,
are part of the system itself.
Michael, there's an easy solution to all of that.
Just more technology.
Besides not reading Lacan.
More technology.
More technology. Just put technology on it. So a technocrat looks at all the problems in the world and says, just put some technology on it. A Bolshevik looks at all the problems in the world and says, just put a committee on it. An anarcho-syndicalist says, just put a committee on it. At the end of the day, most people think you should just put a committee on it. But look, that's not fair. And we'll get into a more fair take later. But for right now, you're drawing on your psychoanalytic thinking here. So let's rewind and just go to just me. Me at the time that I was getting into this stuff, I was realizing this makes a lot more sense than what we're doing. I would much rather live there than what we're doing. And this is the best thing I've heard. And so until someone has something better, this is it. And so that was kind of my default assumption for before I went to college. And I think it was reading Hobbes and Machiavelli and some of the dark side of political philosophy that made me realize, oh no, this is not going to be actualized without a world revolution. It would take, but we're talking about a world war. It would never actually become a real revolution. It would instantly play into the hands of all nationalists everywhere, because normal, regular people aren't going to think that that's more plausible than what is going on outside their window. And they're going to want some sense of normalcy. And so the whole idea of, like, right now, I mean, there was a time when I wasn't as worried about World War III as I was climate change or, immediate relief from the soul crushing weight of capital. Now I'm a little more anti World War III, but I also don't feel any power or ability to change anything. And figure if it happens, it'll happen. Also, you could argue it's kind of been going on for since the Cold War. It never stopped. Thinking that the war is over has been, you could argue, the CIA's whole agenda anyway. Now, that's fine. It's whatever. So all I'm saying is that's where my head was going into things. And it's a nice bridge back to the idea of the left and why I now go with Marx. And so someone in the chat asked me if I'll be covering what you said, NML and open Marxism today, by the way. Chris, were you the one who suggested that I listen to some podcast about that stuff? The answer is no. You have to email me, theoryplebe@gmail.com, if you want me to actually know about or look into that thing. Listen, stop recommending stuff to me. Stop distracting me. I'm lecturing here. Email me. If you want me to look at stuff, email me. All right, so back on it. Side chats, no. So what are we doing here? I want to talk about the left before Marx enters the scene. Was a lot like what Jacques Fresco and his wife, who is helping narrate, were just talking about. It's a lot like that. Reading anarchists and socialists from before Marx's day is a lot like that. If you've ever read Rousseau, Rousseau's like, people are just naturally good, and they're out there in nature just living with the trees. And a man could just walk around and fuck who he liked, and then he could walk away and go do other stuff. And if babies were born, he didn't even know about it because he was off doing other things, which was a very convenient rationalization for the fact that he kept dropping off his own children that were illegitimate at orphanages where they were probably going to die because children did not have a very good life expectancy if they were dropped off at an orphanage back then. Fun fact. But I didn't know that. When I first started reading Rousseau, when I was more of a utopian socialist, Rousseau just was like, oh my God, this guy has it all figured out. Because I had already read Plato and Aristotle and Machiavelli and Hobbes and all these other people and Locke. And Locke had been better than Machiavelli and Hobbes. I was like, okay, he's good. This is a good bourgeois liberal critique of monarchy. A critique of ancient hierarchies that are justified in their rule by supposed divine ordinance or whatever. And so Locke deconstructs the divine right of kings in his first treatise on government. And then he follows that up with another treatise where he argues for the right of a people to revolt, the right of a revolution against a tyranny, and he talks about tyranny a lot. This is what the founding fathers of the United States took most seriously. And it was probably the one feather in their cap that we have to acknowledge was a good concern on their part. It's important. And so this left that Rousseau was a part of, though, the pre-Marx left, was seeing bodies on the side of the street, dead corpses, right? Like we're talking about children. Oh, do you have the quote handy, Michael? That'd be a good one to pull up right now. So he's going to pull up a quote from Engels's Conditions of the English Working Class that epitomizes the moment
Let's see here.
pretty well, probably.
I wonder if it's going to be too long to fit in chat, probably.
Watcher said Rousseau was a player and also crazy bold in face of the state. Very surprising. It's not surprising. The guy was clearly enjoying himself. The guy loved drama. It's like me. If I just gave myself over to drama and angry streaming, I would probably do very well for myself, and I'd have a lot of fun, and I would spend a lot of time talking about how miserable I am. But in reality, I'm asking for it. I'm enjoying it. It's literally my source of enjoyment. I see that as death drive. I try to avoid it as best I can. I still lose it sometimes, but for the most, you can, if you just read his confessions, he's just like, oh, everybody hates me, I'm always on the run, but he's glorifying it and he's setting himself up. It's very like on the nose, like Pharisees praying on the street corner, like, oh, I'm so good, and also I sacrifice so much, I am deserving of so much, and I have so little to show for it because I'm not greedy. I don't have the respect that I used to for Rousseau because he's not a main player for me, but my buddy Kent loves Rousseau and is offended right now if he's listening to this because he just heard me say that. And he's heard me say it before, and we've had our disagreements about it, but I can be sympathetic of the guy, and I think that he plays an important role in the history of ideas like Machiavelli does. I just don't put him like on this level that I do, say, Marx or like I don't know, a lot of the people that you'll see me go to more often.
Hey, the Engels quote is in chat.
You just shared it? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
It had to be broken up into fragments, but it's there.
Do you want to read it or shall I?
Go ahead.
Most unwholesome of all is the work of the runners, who are usually children of 7 and even of 5 and 4 years old. Commissioner Granger actually found one child of 2 years old employed at this work. In the least unfavorable case, aggravated nearsightedness follows. In the worst case, which is frequent enough, incurable blindness from amaurosis. But apart from that, the children, in consequence of sitting perpetually bent up, become feeble, narrow-chested, and scrofulous from bad digestion. Frederick Engels, The Condition of the Working Class in England. So that's what people are responding to. And so insofar as I might think that Rousseau lacked the sort of critical self-awareness that would have come from reading Nietzsche, thinking about ressentiment, or reading Lacan and thinking about jouissance, right? Like, without reading that, he's got the spinach in his teeth syndrome. Like, he just doesn't know, right? And so he can't really be blamed because those guys come way the fuck after he does. Nietzsche not too far after, but Nietzsche is directly responding to Rousseau, Proudhon, Bakunin when he does his critiques of socialism and the left. He's not doing a critique of Marx, actually, and Marx and Nietzsche's critiques align in many ways, as Jonas Cheka talks about in How to Philosophize with a Hammer and Sickle. Glad I remembered that. So, but where Marx can be argued to be the most profound, earth-shattering critique of the left in the history of politics. And that the reason it's so profound and earth-shattering is that he's doing it from within the left. So he says things like communism is an ideological perversion that is dependent on what it sets itself up against. Like, he can say that stuff in private, and I've got the quote for that somewhere. But he can say that kind of thing in private, talking about how Marxism, how communism's this bastard of a thing that completely misunderstands its own dialectical reliance on that which it is against, meaning that it can't be the end of history that you actually want to get to if it's actually dependent on coexistence with the thing that it's against, which is something that he was writing about in 1843. It should be on pages 12 to 13 here on the Robert C. Tucker reader. I'm not going to pull it up. I'll just leave it at that. So anyway, so he's thinking about, communism is this ideological perversion and the left is totally fucked. And then he goes and writes the Communist Manifesto. And then you got to go, wait a minute, what? Wait, the guy who wrote the manifesto was the guy who thought that how did that happen? Okay. And so part of what we will have to talk about going forward is how that happened. So just set that aside for now, bookmark it. Let's keep going. So what was the left at the time? The left at the time, in a nutshell, was feels over reals. okay? The left at the time was responding to the empiricist, positivist, simplistic kind of political economy that was issuing in the aftermath of John Locke and was personified in the likes of Adam Smith and Ricardo, whose first name I do not know yet. But so you got Ricardo and Smith.
David Ricardo, right?
You say David?
I think it's David Ricardo, yeah.
Oh my God. I didn't know there was anyone cool with my name. Oh wait, there's also David Hume, actually. So, okay. Good company. So, and they all kind of actually fit together because they're all bourgeois radicals. So, the bourgeois radical thought, like I said with John Locke, was this, hey, people should be able to overthrow a tyrannical ruler, all right? And the divine right of kings is bullshit, okay? And stop torturing people in the town square just to make an example of them for your own priestly power or for your own kingly power, all right? Stop that. And then this idea that the third estate should have rights too, right? And so the third estate was the bourgeois class being the productive class, the people who make things. This is how it was. They were the mercantilists, they were the merchants, basically, but also the workers, also the capitalists. Before capitalism really exploded, right? Just add water, within a very short period of time, capitalism hits its industrial phase. Well, before it hits its industrial phase, before it gets to its most peak and condensed, concentrated form of human misery, like what that quote was describing. Oh no, I lost my train of thought. Michael, help me.
I'm not sure where you're talking about.
Oh no, it's because hold on. There's someone knocking outside. 1 second. Hello. Hello.
Are you streaming still?
Yeah. Right now.
Oh,
I'll tell
I
you.
was going to do the blessing.
We're good. They can't see you.
All right.
Speaking of child runners, someone brought me my food just now. I'm not going to eat right now, though. Okay, what were we talking about? Before, I was saying before...
You're talking about how we get to Marxism.
Yeah. Oh, I'm talking about why the bourgeois revolution was radical. And I'm just saying that before capitalism exploded, it was easy to just talk about all productive people as a single class. Okay? And so that included capitalists and workers. And so the bourgeois revolution wants the priest class and the king class. And really, we should talk about them almost as castes, right? Because a class is like there's some flexibility between these things. Before the bourgeois revolutions, you're pretty much destined because of which family you're born into. You're destined for what kind of occupation you're able to pursue. And there were two kinds of aristocratic parasites. And within those castes of parasitic priests or rulers, there were some good people. There were some good people on both sides, and I'm not trying to say that the history of humanity before the bourgeois revolution was a history of pure exploiters and oppressors against the exploited and oppressed, because that's the kind of dichotomistic thinking that comes out of political rhetoric and polemic, but not what we're doing, okay? So the bourgeois revolution that happened in the United States and then happened in the French Revolution were both part of the thought of John Locke and Adam Smith and Ricardo, okay? And so that's classical political economy, and that was sacrosanct at the time. And so people will talk about, oh, well, what's the point of that? No one reads that stuff anymore anyways. No one in economics really reads those guys anyway. That's true. And I've even seen this form of pushback go so extreme. There's this guy with platypus who gave some lecture, and I don't know his name, forgive me, but he goes and he says that that, so Marx is doing a critique of political economy because it's what everybody took to be important at the time, and so he was just focusing on that. But now it could be anything. It could be a critique of Netflix. This is bullshit. No, absolutely not. Not in my house. Get the fuck out of here with that. And I would happily have a conversation with him in the future about it. I just think that this is profoundly mistaken for some very important reasons that we'll get into. Okay? So, political economy is really just economics that tried to understand the whole, that tried to understand everything as a system. After Marx destroys it, or after people realize that the logical conclusions of political economy and of capitalism are Marxist, everyone becomes sort of, the word is myopic, focused on a small area. And so in philosophy, that looks like analytic philosophy. And in economics, that looks like the marginalist revolution, the Austrians, and these kinds of debates over inflation and currency and fiat versus gold and all, recession and underconsumptionist, forms of crisis. That's what becomes the focus, always in kind of like this non-system approach, because no one wants to read Capital, and they would have to read Capital many times before they would be able to even come close to doing something similar, but for our current day and age, which is obviously quite the task. So at the time, bringing this back around to Rousseau, let's just say that you, listening to this, are living then at the time, and you are going to work. It's 5 o'clock in the morning. You went to sleep at midnight. You didn't really. You're sleeping probably in a bed with like the rest of your family and your grandparents, and you're in like a single room shack, like. And you walk outside, and it's like there's rows of people like walking outside, and you're all getting in line to go into these factories. There's mud on the streets. There's corpses on the side of the streets. There's little children in line with you. Some of them are actually like trying to get a job to replace you so that you can't support your own family. And you think to yourself, this sucks. This is not freedom. I don't like it. Later on, someone's talking about it, and they go, I think this sucks. I don't like it. You go, yeah, me either. Okay. That makes you a leftist at the time. And that makes you against these political economy guys, Smith and Ricardo, because what they had developed was an ultimate justification for the immiseration of the lowest end of the working class. And that being that, well, it's a short-term sacrifice that will force technological developments that will trickle down, right? And someone like Ricardo really didn't like landlords and really thought that, that we needed to radically redistribute wealth and all of these things. But in the same way, but at the same time, though, he still presupposes and reifies and utilizes the main concepts of political economy, and that guys like John Stuart Mill, Ricardo, and Smith all shared. Okay, and so there you are on the work floor, and you're talking to your coworker about how this fucking job sucks. We spend 17-hour days every day just moving the same goddamn thing. Just think about it. My grandpa owned his own land. And yeah, he had to pay 1/3 of everything that he grew to the priest, and another third of everything he grew to the king, the feudal lord or whatever. But here I am, at least he had, about several months out of the year that he didn't have to work because the seasons were out.
He also got to work at his own pace.
He got to work at his own pace. He got to spend the time off when the seasons, because capitalism has no respect for seasons, but farming did, right? And so you'll notice that throughout the year, there's times of the year that you're going to work and it stays dark for a couple hours. That didn't exist in any previous human civilization. That was never a thing. That is a product of liberal time, of a detachment of time from humans, events, and localities that then becomes independent of those things and linear, and that atomizes, that individualizes, and using the economics term, it makes us fungible to capital, meaning...
Well, it's also the result of privileging quantitative value over qualitative value.
Yeah, something that we're going to have to get into. So this whole setup I'm doing, just to say that you're so let's just, me and Mikey, we're there on the factory floor talking about how, you know what, our grandparents, they sure were exploited, but they seem to have it better. And then, but then Mikey's like, yeah, but, you know, I've looked into it a little bit, and this is better, though. Why? Oh, you know, political economy. And so that, you know, people trying to make sense out of things would look into political economy, and there you have the cold, hard, very, you know, super distilled reason of the British intellect, basically just gaslighting you, saying, this is for your good, though. And, you know, someone...
I get to choose who I work for.
Yeah, you get to choose who you work for. And now you're not a serf, so it's better, right? Now, Marx agrees on a bunch of things that some of the later Marxists will have a huge problem with him agreeing with them on, such as saying, you know, so Marx agrees, yeah, capitalism is better than feudalism. Every stage in the advancement of humankind is better than its previous stage, though previous stages still stay with us in various ways. You know, that's sort of this Hegelian view that the previous stage is never abolished, it's sublated, it's integrated, it kind of stays with us. You know, slavery was there in ancient history, and here slavery keeps popping up in different forms. Okay, well, wage labor is a form of slavery, but it's a deceptive form that obfuscates itself. It hides behind things like, hey, I work for a few hours, you pay me some money. That sure seems fair. Doesn't seem like you were forcing me to do it or anything. Never mind the fact.
I choose to be here.
I chose. Yeah. Well, you know, you could always just go down the street, right?
You don't like working here? Go find a job you do. Well, but here's the point, right? Quit the capitalist class itself. Quit. Just say, I don't want to work for any capitalist. Period.
Yeah. Try.
See where that gets you.
Try it. We'll see how far that goes. Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's indirect coercion.
Right. Now, what I'm about to say is where I just feel like no matter how many times people say what I'm about to say, it doesn't seem to get through. And so I don't really expect the people who operate in the mode or hold the assumptions I'm about to talk about, I don't expect you to change. But for those who see it, you'll be like, well, yeah, duh. So it's just kind of like echo chamber speak at this point, which is part of the reason we need a new symbolization. I don't want to get stuck in scripted ways of talking about things, but just to help make sense of where it was then, all right? There were people, call them beautiful souls, people who are oppressed and are under the crushing weight of capital in the state. They're exploited every day. They look around. They try to figure out what's going on. They find out, oh, reason. Economic necessity and reason are the reason that this is all happening. And so, you know, this British empiricist and political economic way of thinking about the world justifies all of this. Okay, so then if you are to, for instance, bring up with a capitalist that these conditions are inhumane, this is unsafe, children shouldn't work 17-hour days, hell, we shouldn't even be working 10-hour days, we need to seriously change the way that we're doing things, the response you get from anybody who's not in your same class position is, you're right, but there's also other bigger issues that matter a lot more, and also part of the bigger picture is that this is for your own good. Keeps you out of trouble. Okay? And so you go back to work and then you see them go by in their horse-drawn buggy with servants or slaves, and they've got their little monocles and their nice little suits and their hats that make them look so cartoonishly different than you do in the same clothes that you've been wearing all week. At this point, it is an empirical no one's going to argue with it reality that there is a class divide here where no amount of saving is going to make the difference. This has been obfuscated. That level of difference between classes has been obfuscated through things like consumerism, imperialism, financialization. We get into that in a different century. But just to say that it's found a way to hide these most explicit contradictions doesn't mean that it's fundamentally altered how it works at its essential level. Okay. The thing that people do, that the left did then and that the left does now, is it looks at this and says, I see people who are afraid to lose their power. I see people who are afraid to lose their privilege. I see people who are greedy. I see people who are individualistic. I see people who are competitive. And those affects, those qualities, that mode of capitalists, that is everything that rubs me wrong. I hate it. I hate that, and I choose the opposite. And so it's really, you don't need theory to do this. Me, pre-theory, I got really into that idea. It's just love over hate. It's just love over fear, man. That's what you need. It's love and don't be afraid. Be open to change. That's what it's all about. There's people who's scared of change, and there's people who are open to change. And that's the essential difference in politics. That way of reading politics is with us today, and it was with Marx at the time. And Marx is looking at it and going, so we have this left and right in Parliament. And there's the side that thinks that it's on the side of the right side of history and progress. And then there's the side that thinks that it is trying to hold on to important traditions. And the one side says, hey, they're afraid of progress. And the other side says, they're utopians who are feels over reals and don't have a fucking inkling about economic necessity. Marx goes, this is never going to go anywhere. It's going to just keep greasing the gears that these workers are turning. These so-called representatives will never actually represent their objective interests, which is the overcoming of this thing called capital. Now, the next stage of radicalization for people at the time was to start looking at the machines themselves and thinking, things were better off before this machine made my job so simple. And so you had Luddites, and Luddites were really cool people. I don't want to say anything bad about Luddites. They totally make sense in their context. But Marx is looking at socialists, anarchists, trade unionists, and Luddites. And he's thinking, knowing what I know about political economy, but also knowing what I know about how concepts don't work the way that the British think that they do, and knowing that I hold the same basic values and concerns as all these other people, we've got a real problem. And so what we need is a thoroughgoing critique of political economy that will free not just our imagination in this radical way that, yes, we need that too, but also show us what's actually there, what's being obfuscated by these high concepts from high academic theory in London at the time. Well, also in Scotland, but you know. And so it's this difference between individualism, greed, and competitiveness that leads to people forming identities around collectivism, cooperation, and sharing. And, you know, this whole like love over hate, love trumps hate, and oh, they're just afraid. That thing is something that Marx was looking at dialectically. And he was like, I see that these two things feed off of one another. And therefore, the people who set themselves against the system that fosters the qualities that they are against are basically doing something downstream of what's really fostering those qualities that they don't like. And that is the systemic structural thing going on. So he wanted to do a systemic structural critique, which is not a critique of personality, which is not just saying that if we can curate our identities in a way that is palpable to enough other beautiful souls, then we'll be able to hashtag make the change that we want to see in the world. No, he thinks, no, that's not right. It's going to be something else. What that something else is, and separating the project, his fundamental interests, concerns, questions, and values from the way that gets repackaged and inherited and integrated back into the left after Marx dies, is what we're going to be focusing on in this conversation.
I think that was a good introduction to like contextualization for other the main questions now. Like that sets the right context.
Right.
Because I think, I mean, in a sense, you've tackled two of the big questions that I had.
Yeah, what were those?
Well, first is, what is Marxism? Which, I mean, of course, we have 14 years to talk about that. But I guess the idea here is to define it in a way that really highlights its uniqueness, right? And I guess here by Marxism, because there's the whole distinction, right? Are we talking about specifically Marx's teachings, or are we talking about the Marxist tradition, which those are two entirely different questions? But I think what you just said is you're defining what Marxism is for Marx himself, which is the critique of political economy.
And scientific socialism is the other half. So, but yes, 100%. And so I'll just say a thing about scientific socialism, because I think that that's something that there's two ways that people think about it that I like and hate at the same time that are popular. I just made the screen way cooler, by the way. Can we appreciate how much cooler I made the screen just now? So I put the thumbnail in the background behind the clouds, and now it's got that vaporwave effect. So it's pretty sick. Anyway, see, I'm like I get distracted, and then I'm like squirrel. What?
All right, but here's the hold on.
Yeah.
But I want to do like some sort of like bullet point questions, and just again, these are huge questions, but I also want to see how you string them together in a I want the connect the dots approach here.
Yeah.
So here's the thing, like everything you were just saying, but like if somebody just says, what's Marxism? Now that you've provided the context, how would you define that?
Right. And so half the people I read call themselves Marxians and not Marxists. And so that if we accept their terms, then I'm going to have to define Marxism in a different way. But then most people who call themselves Marxists think that they have the correct Marxism. So the Marxism that unifies all the people in the thumbnail is they're unified by family resemblances. They're the ones that are Eastern, Orthodox, and revolutionary are unified in their fidelity to Marx's 11th thesis on Feuerbach that says that philosophers have only interpreted the world, the point is to change it. And
which is to say philosophers are supposed to be a kind of activist.
Right. And they like the activist version of Marx the most. And usually they see the word revolution as like this, like it's not just a word to them. It's
master signifier.
Yeah, it's a master signifier. It's a good way to say it. The Western Marxists also have their family resemblances, but a lot of them don't call themselves Marxists. I think Derrida's on there. I've got Lacan on there. I've got Baudrillard and Hannah Arendt. I mean, Marxists. A lot of people who call themselves Marxists today don't like Arendt. Caleb Maupin, who's been popularizing a certain kind of Marxism has taken pot shots at Arendt every chance he gets for the last like couple years and he calls her Arnett, which is just donkey brains. But he just hates her because she wrote a book called The Origins of Totalitarianism, and he doesn't like the fact that she draws connections between the Bolshevik form of organizing and the National Socialist Nazi form of organizing. But so
you don't like any kind of even hint of conflation of those two as totalitarian systems,
right? Because the word totalitarian is used to obfuscate the fundamental value differences between fascism and communism. Okay.
To be fair, Zizek also doesn't like Arendt's take on that, but it's also because he's approaching it differently and obviously with much more theoretical.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, then that's good. Because it cut out for a second, and so now people should be back with us. Okay. The internet speed is really great when it is working, but then it just drops and comes back sometimes because it's wireless.
Well,
anyway,
perfectly right now.
Well, I'm glad you're patient. So, what were you saying again?
No, I'm just saying that Zizek too. I mean, it's funny. Zizek and Maupin, but Zizek would also disagree with this kind of conflation or identification of fascism and we'll say Stalinism, right? But for him, it's because he has a lot of theoretical clarifications and distinctions in how the ideologies and
there's the obvious,
but at the same time, he's not saying like one is good and the other one's really bad. He would,
right. And also, from the standpoint of being a Jew, for Arendt and for Levinas, the two thinkers of totalitarianism, I think, that are the most profound. As Jews, they both feel like the main ideologies on the world stage not only do not like even consider their interests, more importantly their situation, their precarity in society. And so you got to think from their position, they see that Churchill and Roosevelt are both anti-Semitic, and that's liberalism. But liberalism isn't putting Jews in camps yet. And is actually setting itself up as the lesser evil that's against putting people in camps. Okay, so from that perspective, you're like, well, liberalism does seem like the lesser evil for now. And then
unless you're Japanese,
and so if you were, but I don't think Arendt ever thought about Japanese people. So but she's thinking about her.
I'm just using the Zizekian insight, which all three of the main ideological systems of the 20th century, at one point or another, put people in camps.
Right, they all end up doing it. Yeah, that's true. And so anyway, but yeah, we don't have to do this thing where we go too deep into totalitarianism. I do want to go deeper into it in the future with these conversations, but for now, For now, I'm going to leave it off, though, on just one of the main things that comes to people's mind when they think about the difference, and the thing you'll hear from the Maupin left is that there's no comparison between Nazis and the Red Army, because the Red Army was doing everything for a good cause, the ends justified the means, as opposed to a pure reaction. A movement of pure reaction that opportunistically scapegoated an ethnic other as the center of its political ideology, which is, to all liberal and progressive sentiments, itself pure evil. And so the difference is between pure evil and someone who had a really good idea and tried to make it happen and then failed along the way. And also failed due to a lot of outside interventions. Okay? And I think that is a respectable view, but it also misses, I think, the real slap in the face, which is that a person, at least when you have a mask off evil person doing evil, you go, okay, strong leader, we get it. You're a bad guy. We get it. What's the rules? Is there a rule book we can play by? We don't want to get gassed. Okay. As opposed to a society that says, we've achieved communism, comrade. We're there. This is it. You're still working. In fact, you're working more hours than you were before. And in fact, if you stop working, we're going to tell you that you are a counter-revolutionary traitor and shoot you on the spot or take you off to a work camp. So the slap in the face comes from someone saying, we're doing this for your own good. And then you're still in the gulag.
And to use Zizek again, right? Like, I mean, he's made this point where he's like, what happened with the Soviet Union in the 20th century is the great tragedy of that century, because with the Nazis, it's evil fuckers doing what evil fuckers do. That's just the way it goes, right? When evil motherfuckers get into power. What happens when a system based around the best values humanity is capable of ends up doing what the Soviet Union did? For him, that's where the greater tragedy is, because it's based in the principles of freedom, equality, etc., and yet that's what happened.
Yes. No Epiphany in the chat says, if we think about the inverted totalitarianism in the U.S., the convo gets even more interesting. And actually, so that's a good kind of brings me back to Arendt and Levinas and a lot of the people that I was saying that the Western Marxists, a lot of them aren't even Marxists. They don't call themselves Marxists. But what makes them Marxist from the standpoint of someone who's researching the effect that Marx had on history and the way that he is received and thought about by people who are sympathetic and critical, the unifying factor for everyone on that picture is that dialectics, totality, labor, exploitation, oppression, freedom, all of these terms are for them fundamentally and inescapably thought, if not the way that Marx thought about them, probably almost never in the way that Marx thought them, at least thought in reference to how they understand Marxists to be thinking about these terms. And I say that so you have a lot of these people who are critical of Marxism, and the Marxism that they're critical of, I would argue, is the exact same Marxism that Marx was critical of when his son-in-law told him about the French Marxists, and he followed that by saying, well, then I am not a Marxist. Very famous quote from Marx, where he says, well, then I'm not one of them. And so, and that's, part of how I see this thing is that after his success, everybody wanted to either use him or found themselves, if they wanted to do radical thinking, they found themselves having to argue with people who were using him. And so most of the French postmodern, post-structuralist, existentialist, archaeologist, whatever you want to call them, types of usually culture critique people, you gotta think about their context is one where they were occupied by Nazis for a while, and so they were really excited when Americans and the English and a bunch of other people who are going to be butthurt that I leave them out of this list, as well as Stalin, defeated the Nazis. And so the French were pretty relieved about that, pretty humiliated and not happy about the fact that their resistance, so-called, had been they hadn't put up much of a resistance. And so people like Jean-Paul Sartre spent the rest of his life thinking, how is it that all of these people who speak such radical rhetoric immediately caved to Nazis when they actually invaded, and refused to join the resistance? Or you have someone like Althusser thinking, well, there's some serious problems with Marxism, and we need Marxism because Marxism is the truth. We just need to get it back to its scientific basis. And Althusser and Sartre were very, very, very influential on the development of everybody who is doing this culture critique stuff in France. And so nowadays, when we think about theory, most of it's downstream from those guys or from the Frankfurt School, which are two ways that the emphasis of the economic emphasis of the Second International as well as the Third International. This is where the turn happens, and that the main thing I want to stop at this point to say before we get some questions or whatever is just that even when they're not critiquing Marxism, once you learn what to look for, you realize they're usually doing just that. And so any talk of same and other, any talk of desire, any talk of libidinal economy, any talk of history and the problems, issues of complexity and the fragmentation of groups and meaning, these things are all the post Cold War trying to make sense of the failures of Stalinism and trying to understand why didn't the workers do what was in their interest, and more importantly, trying to do it in a way that won't get them canceled, because cancel culture was more real for them. Badu, he's up on the screen, right? The mouse is over his face. I don't know if you can see the mouse on the screen, but Badu canceled Deleuze. Deleuze was lecturing, and Badu comes running in with a bunch of Maoists calling him a fascist, and they wouldn't let the class go on. Why?
Or how about how Baudrillard was ostracized by the French academics?
Yeah, Baudrillard got ostracized, and he wrote this after production book that is arguing against a version of Marxism. Lyotard wrote what he called later his evil book, where he says that the workers desire their oppression. And I think seeing Lyotard get the kind of hate and death threats and such that he got for putting that book out, it could be argued to be one of the reasons that someone like Lacan doesn't just ever come out and say it. Now, obviously he has his own practice and his theoretical reasons for it, but he still drops bombs like, oh, you don't want to master, or what's that one?
Well, yeah, it's from Seminar 17, where he says, you revolutionaries desire a master, don't worry, you'll get one. Which
Right.
is to say, if what's operating in that statement, he's saying, you're all hysterics, you don't know what you want, and you secretly, even though you're anti-authoritarian and all that, what you secretly want is some authority figure like a Stalin to show up, take control, and tell you what to do and organize the situation, and because you can't figure out your own desire.
And that student who crashes his lecture, and we caught that on film. I mean, humanity caught that on film. History. That student who crashes his lecture comes in with long hair and patches on his vest. They looked the same then as they do now. That's the funny thing. And
you feel like that kid, you feel like he knew what he actually wanted?
No. That guy comes in there and did he spill water on
he spilled water and threw stuff off the table or whatever, and
then he just talks about how he's trying to actualize his potential and be authentic.
Well, it's similar, right, to the video clip that you posted, from the Zizek lecture, where an Avakian Marxist, if we want to even say that, goes up, he's talking to Zizek saying, "I want revolution. We want revolution." And Zizek's sitting there going, "Okay, what does that concretely mean? What types of policies? How would you organize society?" He's trying to go into the real, what do you actually want? And all she can say is, "I want revolution. I want revolution."
No, she clarifies it a couple times she says real revolution.
Real revolution. Yes.
And she says, and then she finally says that it will be like the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, and the Chinese Cultural Revolution, except that it will be better this time. That's what
It'll
she
be
said.
really nice now.
It'll be good this time. Yeah.
Right. And so the point is, this is something that Lacan was aware of. And look, I'm not even going to say Lacan really belongs in the leftist tradition. I mean, if there's aspects of his thought that are leftist, and I think that's true, he himself was just a kind of run-of-the-mill conservative guy, and
Really?
yeah, he wasn't some major French Marxist intellectual. But I think, honestly, the fact that he was, you and I would probably just call him a normie compared to, like, you know, the political-minded thinkers like Guy Debord and
Sartre,
Bourdieu,
yeah.
and like Sartre and Althusser and all them. But maybe him just being a type of normie gave him this insight, which he saw that leftists put forth these really strong, we could even say impossible demands, and saying, like, this is what I want, and they're ultimately vague. They lack context.
You'll have to restate that sentence.
Did we cut out?
Yeah, but we're back.
Okay, I'm just saying that for us, Lacan was a kind of normie, and maybe his normie perspective enabled him to see this in leftists, which is to say, leftists make all of these impossible demands on the system, and what these demands actually translate, like what they're explicitly demanding, what it actually means as far as their unconscious desire goes, is I don't actually know what I want. I want somebody to show up and tell me how to desire, tell me what I want, because I can't figure it out.
Right.
And that's what's actually operative behind these big demands that leftists make. And so maybe in a sense, because he wasn't a Maoist or a French leftist radical, he was able to spot that.
But he's responding to the Maoists, and that's the
Right. Yeah.
that's the thing, is like a French Maoist, people will disavow French Maoists. People who are Marxist-Leninist Maoists will denounce French Maoists, call them bourgeois student LARPers, which is typical of Eastern Orthodox, revolutionaries, is pretty much in the position they hold. They see, like, there's nothing you can really do in terms of practical activism in the imperial core or in the developed world without, there's nothing practical you can ask. There's no practical, all you can do is cause, try to damage the system, put yourselves on the gears, try to smash some things, try to give them a harder time, because the real work's going to come from the periphery, from the post-colonial subjects, and so the new left kind of accepts that. They think the working class is more or less. It's not more. The working class in the developed world seems to have gotten some wins from its struggles, and now they are complacent and even happily participating in capitalism sometimes. And so they're looking at that, and but there's still, like, segregation, and women can't vote, and there's still by the 60s they could, right? So but there's still segregation, but there's this period of American radicalism, that is seeing what's going on in the Russian Revolution, and then later in the Chinese Revolution, and then in Vietnam and such, and the radicals then are trying to figure out, well, what do we do? Well, we're just like, rich kids, like, because mostly like they were student radicals, and so we'll end up talking about the new left, and we'll talk about all these other things. We'll talk about all these different kinds of Marxisms. For now, everything that has been said so far is just to say that half the people on that screen don't call themselves Marxists, but they're still thinking about the concepts. They probably read some Marx. They are probably worried about getting canceled by Maoists who just rushed into Deleuze's lecture because Deleuze had the audacity to do metaphysics, and metaphysics was considered bourgeois, and therefore he's fascist. It's just, it's crazy stuff. But he redeemed himself with those people by working with Guattari, so it all worked out.
Or Guattari ruined Deleuze.
But if you ask me what Marxism is, now that I've done all that clarifying, I'll just say, to me, Marx wasn't a Marxist. Marx was not fundamentally a communist or a revolutionary or a reformist. Marx was fundamentally a thinker. And yes, he also wanted his thought to be useful to action. He still sat on committees. He still made speeches to general assemblies. He started newspapers. So he was always sharpening his tools and his wits and debating and engaging in active political organizing and struggle and getting chased out of countries and all of that glorified activism. But he was first and foremost someone who was profoundly influenced by the history of ideas, and he wanted to do an immanent critique of everything in existence. He in that same letter where he talked about communism being this bastardized thing that actually depends on its opposite and all of this, in that exact same piece, he says that we need to do this critique of everything in existence. Now hold on, got to get my tea kettle. Okay, and we've got about 20 more minutes here. So this is really, I'm going to spend about 5 minutes wrapping this one up, and then we'll spend the last 15 minutes touching on the chat. We'll spend the last 15 minutes, Mikey will be touching on things that he wants to talk about next time, or bringing up stuff that didn't get finished here. But for me, Marxism is not detached, speculative thinking about what's real that makes reference to the table in front of the thinker because that's what's closest at hand, which is kind of where the British were at with their empiricism. Almost everything that they thought about being in the world was thought through the lens of well, the table's in front of me, the table is real. Is it though? Do I really know if it's real? And that was philosophy for them. I'm not being fair. They were doing way more important stuff than that. I mean, at the end of the day, you got to think that rigorous empiricism did a lot of methodological reductions that had a viral spread that got people thinking outside of what they were being told was real, which was that God wanted the king and the priesthood to live parasitically off their back and that they had no rights.
Can I just say,
yes, do it.
Philosophically, I like that as like saying that's one of the good things about empiricism, because I myself, I go hard in a critique of empiricism, but I like that is a dialectical interpretation of it, which is to say, like, okay, yeah, it has all these shortcomings, but what did it actually succeed in doing? It's like Zizek talks about with Ayn Rand. Like, it's funny because the last thing anybody who's like remotely tapped into the Marxist tradition, you think, would do is give Ayn Rand credit, but he actually says, look, like, actually what she does is portray the capitalist mindset in a pure form than anybody else. Like, she actually did us a service by depicting it in this way. And so instead of just being flat out anti-Rand, there's a way that all of us leftists in any way, shape, or form should, like, feel indebted to her. Like, thank you so much for actually condensing this form of thought, this logic of capital accumulation.
Right. Well, and for her, I mean, she didn't ever read.
You distilled its essence for us. And so the same thing with empiricism.
You cut out for a second.
Oh, I'm saying, no, I'm just saying, like, she distilled the essence for us, and in a way that we can use even against her. And
right.
It's like empiricism, despite its reductionism, classical empiricism would not recognize any of the phenomena that the phenomenologists we love talk about, whether
right.
we're talking about Sartre, Heidegger, or Levinas. They'd say you're talking about invisible shit that's not there, right? But
right.
at the same time, empiricism was incredibly important in fighting against superstitious ideology.
Right. Descartes.
So it has its truth.
Right. And Descartes, Hume, and Locke are like three of the most important critical epistemological thinkers for clearing the table, for suspending assumptions, and for saying, am I just being gaslit by power right now? And they did that.
Yeah, exactly.
They did that.
And, this Hegelian, it's a Hegelian point. This is what Hegel does with phrenology. So in Phenomenology of Spirit, he goes through his analysis of phrenology, and phrenology is the idea that you can deduce a person's personality or intelligence from the indentations of their skull. Of course, this is bullshit, and it was always used as racism. I don't think there's any phrenology itself is racist, but the beauty of Hegel is he goes, okay, that is complete bullshit, but the truth of phrenology isn't in what it's trying to assert as its truth. The truth is that it makes an identification between human spirit or subjectivity and materiality, which is to say our subjectivity is not independent. Of course, we would say of our brain, right?
Right.
We're not separate from our bodies. So there, even though phrenology itself is bullshit in its explicit claims, it's still in its form getting at something true. And so it's true against itself, right? And that's the way we're talking about empiricism or Ayn Rand. And this is a form of doing dialectics.
Yeah.
Seeing the truth in untruth.
Right. Elle says classical pragmatism is better on this stuff.
Maybe.
I mean, you like Peirce.
I like Peirce, yeah. But
I mean, I also think that pragmatism comes close at times to aspects of what Heidegger did to the critique of modernity and this kind of empiricism and of positivism and stuff like that. Except that people before Heidegger had also done that. The point was that he tried to do a structuralist phenomenology, and he failed. But what he tried to do and what happened there in Being in Time and, kind of leading up to and following from that failure makes the pragmatists pale for me in comparison. But here's the problem. People will say, well, if you can get Dewey to say that aspect of the thing that you like that Heidegger is doing, and you can get James to say this other aspect, and then you can get and then they eventually get to, well, then why are you reading a Nazi? And I actually was getting yelled at after a conference in a pub by this guy. I was going to call him a radlib, but he was more of a normie Democrat. He really was. He was a normie Democrat who was really into pragmatism, and he was really mad that I was relying on Heidegger to make some points that he thought could be made with pragmatism. And it's just like, when I go to pragmatists, there's things I like. And it's just like, but they're not like these system thinkers. I like system thinkers. I like system thinkers and people who critique systems. And ultimately, I'm committed to like reading the pragmatists backwards and forwards. But I'm just saying, I do think it's funny that I got yelled at. And that we were in a heated debate for probably an hour and a half. And there was 10 people around us, and they were all drinking, having a good time. But we were I felt very I actually have to make my case for myself. And then he also he was like, throw out Hegel too, throw out Husserl too, throw out Nietzsche too, throw out German idealism, throw it all out. He was against it all. Anyway, there are people who will have those kinds of problems with using someone like that. Oh, okay. Well, why do I use him though? And it's when you're doing critique, you need to radically suspend, challenge, interrogate, deconstruct these fundamental assumptions, categories, articulations, interpretations that have been monopolized by a movement or an organization or institution in that field. And you have to separate out signifiers from signifieds. And then you have to try to get to the phenomenal domain that got us thinking about those things in the first place. And then if that phenomenal domain is part of a larger structure, then what the fuck are you supposed to do then? And so we've had various philosophers try to radical new approaches to trying to think about these things. And there's all kinds of really cool stuff that's developed. And a lot of the people on the screen, I think, are helpful for some of that. But for me, bringing it back to that question, what is Marxism? I'll say it this way. Marxism is the critique of political economy for the sake of a scientific socialism, because utopian socialism creates, reifies, and perpetuates everything that it's against, and actually that doesn't just shoot itself in the foot, it undermines other people's possibilities at success every time it does the things that we've already talked about. And so what we need is a scientific approach. Now, there's a I'm critical of Marx in a lot of ways, but we have to defend where he gets it right, when people have historically constantly misinterpreted him in fucking obvious ways. Okay? And so first, when you're doing this sort of project where you go back to basics, you have to salvage the thinker and their project from the bullshit dismissals. Like, I keep seeing people using Joseph Schumpeter, and I tried to like do that, guys. I tried to read it. I wanted to throw it against the wall. It was as anti-Marxist in a sort of religious and dumb way, or a dumb religious way, not a smart religious way, as opposed to it was about as bad in that sense as like oh, Lenin is the embodiment of everything Marx was talking about, and either Stalin or Trotsky or Mao or Castro or Nakumbra, or just, I don't know, pick your revolutionary leader, is the natural inheritor of the immortal science that is correct and is the truth. Actually, I've got a quote here from Lenin. I have to read it, because what we're getting to now is worldview Marxism, which is downstream from critique of political economy and scientific socialism. And it likes to use the word science the same way that L. Ron Hubbard likes to use the word science. Do you know who that is, Mikey?
Oh, L. Ron Hubbard. Oh, yeah, that's Mr. Dialectics.
Yes.
Not to be confused with Dialectics.
That's right. I know. Oh, my gosh. It's so funny, the connections between these guys.
Let me tell you what. I don't know if you could find it online. So years ago, I was at the library up the street, and I was just bumming around, looking through books and whatever. And I went over to at the time, I mean, they still had VHS tapes. And so there was a VHS tape that's like an introduction to Scientology. And it was a promotional tape the Church of Scientology put out. But it goes into the whole thing, like the auditing and all of it. It is the most hilariously cheesy video. Like, it's worth watching just for entertainment value if you can find it. I bet it's on YouTube somewhere.
Listen, if you're ever in Portland and you're gonna go get some Voodoo Donuts, which is almost everybody who goes to Portland goes to that place. So Mikey, if you go to Portland, I will drive out there while you're there, and I'll make sure to show you these things. There's Powell's Bookstore, there's Voodoo Donuts, and
I've heard of both of them.
And then the Church of Scientology is really close to both. And so you got to go in there because they have a private viewing theater. And if you come in, they're going to approach you like you're at a car lot. And they've got all these really fancy looking books with images like up on the shelves. And they don't want you flipping through them so much. It's supposed to look impressive.
They don't want you to know about Xenu and the 75 billion years ago or whatever, the Galactic War with the aliens they dumped on in Earth's volcanoes, and their souls linger around and come to possess our bodies. They call them thetans, and you got to get them audited out of you so you can live a good, healthy life.
No, they don't want you to know about that stuff. It's very esoteric.
Yes.
Or at least they probably don't want us to know about that stuff. Maybe that's their
whether it's 75
plan all
million
along.
or 75 billion, don't you just love that they, like, L. Ron Hubbard would claim to know the dude's name from all those years ago. It's priceless.
Yeah. So I made the connection to L. Ron Hubbard because I'm saying that worldview Marxism can get a little uncritical and, might we say, dogmatic or even ideological sometimes. And here's a quote. And look, if you are in a time of war, your brother was just killed by the fucking czar. People like we're talking 1,000 people marched onto the palace, and they had signs that said, "Please don't shoot us. We need bread." And the guards were like, "Get the fuck out of here." Then they didn't, and then they shot a warning shot, and the people were like, "Please don't." And then they just started gunning them down. in like, I believe that was 1905. So like in a time like that, like being able to critically distance yourself from something is a privilege that you probably don't have. And and we need to act. And Marxism seems to have things figured out. Let's go. Let's go. And so, but you get this. I'm going to read from Lenin's The Three Sources and Three Component Parts of Marxism. But this quote is being featured as a perfect example of worldview Marxism on page 25 of Michael Heinrich's An Introduction to the Three Volumes of Marx's Capital. But this is the Lenin quote. The teaching of Marx is all-powerful because it is true. It is complete and harmonious, providing men with a consistent view of the universe, which cannot be reconciled with any superstition, any reaction, any defense of bourgeois oppression.
Well, look, I'm going to bring out a technical term, but if that's not a declaration of Marx as the big other, and by big other, for anybody listening, it's a Lacanian term, but it's the idea of a figure who has all the knowledge, has all the answers, and knows all of it with perfect, precise harmony and coherence. And of course, I mean, the whole point of Lacanian psychoanalysis, in part, is to get us to break our dependence on the big other itself in any way, shape, or form. And this is where Marxism, not Marx, but Marxism, it loses me, because as a discourse, it doesn't have all the answers all figured out with perfect coherence.
Right. And then the kinds of, because people had to toe whatever the Marxist line was, but the Marxist line kept changing, intellectuals were in a really awkward position, and the kinds of debates that they ended up having in the universities that had not been shut down yet were ridiculous, to say the least. And so,
well, it's also a belief in the big other. If you truly believe that you are tapped in to the big other and that you're the big other's servant, that's what justifies all the worst forms of violent oppression. That's why Zizek said, you know, the Dostoevsky line is, if there is no God, all things are possible. All things are permitted. And Zizek says, no, it's only if there is a God that all things are permitted. It's only when you believe that your will is submissive and aligned to the will of the big other, the absolute authority with absolute knowledge of the situation, that you can justify doing anything.
yeah, exactly.
And so a lot of Marxists wouldn't say it's Marx himself. They would put the big other as history or whatever. Like history with a capital H is what we're serving. And we have the perfect knowledge of history due to the prophet Marx and his followers. And because of that, we can justify any actions because we're tapped into the ultimate goodwill.
Right. Oh, not only are we tapped into the ultimate goodwill, but also the natural essence of humanity is just to do good and hold hands and work together. And if it wasn't for these people who call themselves realists being so fearful of change, then we'd have that good. And so we just have to figure out a way to scare the fear right out of them. Okay, so but I want to be sympathetic to the fact that a lot of the people, you'll look at it. If you look at the thumbnail, I'm going to go ahead and put it on the top here. Obviously, people listening to this are going to be like, so Plebe and Michael are clearly more sympathetic of these Western Marxists who didn't always even call themselves Marxists, and some of whom probably, I've read articles that claim that a few of, the CIA was very happy that Foucault, Derrida, and Lyotard were popular, and they had no problem putting money towards that. Or Hannah Arendt was part of the Congress for Cultural Freedom, which was an anti-communist organization. And I don't think that invalidates her thought. I think it puts a big question mark over her thought. That's the difference. For me, it puts a question mark over her thought, but it doesn't corrupt her thought in some way that makes her no longer worthwhile. It means that we just have to read it critically.
There's a way I think you and I are more Marxist than a lot of them up there, but I mean, other Marxists would totally agree with that.
Right. But what I was drawing everyone's attention to is that there's a lot of browner skin on the top right of this screen. That there's something besides Spivak, but she's secretly white. Don't worry, because obviously whiteness is just when people do things I don't like, or believe things that I don't believe, or say the wrong thing that they're supposed to. They're supposed to say what I think they're supposed to say, and therefore, if they don't say that, then they've just internalized whiteness, right? So I'm memeing off that. But anyway, point being is, you've got people from Cuba up here, from Africa. I don't know what country Nakumbra is from, or Sankara. I believe that was Indonesia. China. So when it says Eastern Orthodox Marxism, think like there's an old division between East and West, and people have their theories about the different kinds of values that the East holds that the West does not hold, and there's all these cultural ways of analyzing that distinction, and then there's a bunch of critiques of that distinction that try to obliterate the distinction. Okay, look, I just want people to be aware that one of the obvious things that will happen if you go around saying I'm a Western Marxist is people are going to think you're a Western chauvinist, and they're going to think that you don't care about the struggles of people who took some kind of Marxism, took some kind of nationalism, took some kind of religious faith, whatever was popular at the time, and bundled it all together and said it's us versus imperialism because the capitalists are trying to turn us all into banana farmers, and we don't want to do that for the rest of our lives. Okay? And that's legit. I could say, look, my sympathies, but my sympathies can only extend so far to strangers that are abstractions. And people get online and try to speak as representatives for everyone over there. And it's just like, I don't speak for anybody, motherfucker. I speak for me. And it's individualism. You're an egoist. No, I have a little intellectual humility, even though that sounds arrogant to say. I understand the contradiction here, but I try to practice it. Okay. And I do not believe that I can speak on behalf of like these totalizing categories. All right. That doesn't mean that I am not sympathetic to Indonesians or the Vietnamese in their own struggle. I'm back down.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
What was I saying? Before I so rudely interrupted.
We were talking about like of course we can be sympathetic towards people in different countries we don't know, but the idea of like somehow we can just speak to what their interest is.
Right. Yeah, you've made.
I don't feel like I can speak on behalf of my neighbors.
Yeah, you've made yourself a spokesperson for the wretched of the earth, and now your job is to go around and make rich liberals feel bad, and they'll pay for your Patreon so that you can keep doing the good work of triggering dumb chuds in the flyover countries.
The version of indulgences.
Right. Yeah.
I'll pay to get my guilt away.
Exactly. And someone like Spivak there on the screen, professor at Columbia, six-figure income, professional managerial class par excellence, has some good ideas, has some ideas I think that are toxic and dangerous. So she's a mixed bag like all the rest of them. I would say that Simone de Beauvoir and Sartre and Simone Weil and a lot of these people are mixed bags and should be approached with caution, as all genuine thinking should be. So nothing I'm doing is to renounce and to denigrate. But the reason I brought her up is because a lot of the emphasis on post-colonialism comes from her and Homi K. Bhabha. And who are they? They're bougie people from India who've come to tell NPR listening, the Guardian tote bag carrying or Jacobin tote bag carrying leftoids that, hey, you should feel better about things. And no, every time a person says worker, you should probably replace that word with settler. And there's also, there's important things to learn through those critiques as well. But those are almost always these cultural critiques that operate in the realm of recognition and representation, which has a material component in our lives and literally coordinates our existence. And so that should not be class reductionist, like obliterated from the picture. But at the same time, the class reductionist who would remove that from the picture probably doesn't have what I'm about to turn to is the critique of political economy itself. They probably think of class in their own sort of reductive id-pol way that was sort of hand-me-down from Bolsheviks, where standpoint epistemology is basically constantly invoked. Like, I play this game sometimes when I talk about myself as a worker. I am a worker. I come from poverty. I fucking hate capitalism every day of my life. But there's, like, I need to reassert my identity because the people that I'm speaking to, like, don't seem to have any fucking idea what it is like to do a day's work. Or more importantly, they think, oh, well, I'm a worker too. I also work. And you just think that we should all be tailists and cater to reactionary workers. And you just, no, I don't. No, I just believe that we should center workers, and that when we're centering workers, part of that is you're centering the workplace, not your favorite workers. You're not centering your favorite workers. You're centering workers. And if you've ever worked places, you know that the little factional, sectarian, fucking enjoyment-based kinds of antagonisms and cliques that form are not the stuff of a working class politics. It's fun, but that's you and your buddies. And I saw someone literally on Twitter, like, I don't know, it was a year ago. It was right before I quit. This is the reason I quit. The person said, I'm going to start a one-person union. And I was like, I don't think you can. And they were like, why not? And then I was like, oh my God, no, they're actually serious. And so then I was just like, oh, fuck. I'm just kidding. That's not the reason I quit. But I'm just saying, like, you can't have a one-person union and you and your 3 friends in your tree fort out in the backyard, as Totalitarian likes to joke, aren't going to do it either. And so centering people that you disagree with on a lot of things that aren't just ideological but can also be aesthetic, that can also just be the music you listen to, the way you dress, the way you sound, the way you talk, the way you joke. It's supposed to be a mass politics, a universal politics. And there's a way to do the universal that doesn't erase singularity and particularisms and localities. And Todd McGowan's book on identity politics is good for that. There's a universe, and he defends Black Lives Matter using this. He's like, there's a way to think about Black Lives Matter that some BLM activists will talk about. Not all, definitely not all. But it depends on what town you're in. But sometimes they'll use themselves as the exception to that universal as a way to correct the universal, and that's a legit left-based sort of tradition in McGowan's eyes, and he thinks that the left can be salvaged from its identitarian fixation on particularity, and its antithesis,
its own identity politics,
and it being anti-populism, which is the anti-populist left is what won. I wouldn't even say that it's Biden who made it so that the anti-universal left won. It was Bernie's capitulations between 2016 and 2020 that really led the way. And then the rest of that's history. We'll talk about it later. But the critique of political, I want to leave everybody with a metaphor, an analogy for how I think about the difference between critique of political economy and scientific socialism. Because when I was on the education committee of a Marxist organization, and everybody had their ism and their favorite, revolutionary figure that they subscribed to, and I'm in there sort of like suspect because I sound academic or whatever, and they all wanted to, we got to read this, we got to read that, we got to read the other thing, and I'm like, okay, so where's Marx's critique of political economy? And they're all just like blinking at me like, what? And I'm like, well, we got to do at least like a few things on it, and I got pushback. They're just trying to say, well, workers already know that capitalism's bad. Workers already know what they need to do. All we need to do is organize the workers. Marx did the thinking so that we don't have to. They don't say that. One of them actually did say that Marx read Hegel, so we don't have to. Lenin read Marx, so we don't have to. Mao read Lenin, so we don't have to. Marxist Leninism, Maoism, and this was an unironic organizer for the Socialist Party for Liberation, or whatever the hell. It would not DSA. They were more radical than that. They were a lot more anti-imperialist. But that was what she said, and I had like a 3-hour conversation with her trying to get to the bottom of it. And it's those kinds of really awkward and difficult. You almost want to call them contradiction. Contradiction makes it sound conceptual. You're in an embodied space with other people, and they're looking at you with bemusement or scorn because you want to read Estranged Labor, which is not very long and is actually a really good read, and is like one of the first things that Marx ever wrote on the topic. Like it's powerful. It's literally my pipeline in. And they're just like, are you serious? Like, do you want to... And it's just like dismissive. And to me, I'm like, yeah, I was against capitalism when I read Estranged Labor too, but this is a different kind of critique. The realizations that came out of those kinds of awkward situations and trying to communicate over months with some of these people, and like one of them went around and told a bunch of people a bunch of shit, like in private, like trying to oust me from the organization. I don't know, probably not trying to oust me, but just you know, the typical cliquey otherizing bullshit. You know, this is where people are sharing, you know, your conversation out of context to make you sound even more pretentious and arrogant than you actually are. I mean, I'm sure I sound to someone like the person in question, I probably sounded arrogant, but to take me out of context and to part of the context was live phone calls. You can't screen cap the live phone calls, right? Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that kind of organizational struggle becomes visceral for you. And so even if there's not a hard distinction between critique of political economy and scientific socialism from the standpoint of a person who's just reading this stuff theoretically and doesn't actually have to organize, it fucking matters to me. So, and the reason it matters so much is because you can't call it scientific if you can't be skeptical. I've got this Trotsky quote somewhere where he says that theory cannot be skeptical. Well, he's in the middle of a revolution. Okay? I mean, he's had to make some decisions 15 years ago about where he is now, and now it's fucking go. Okay? But we're not in the same situation right now. And if we just accept the same conceptual baggage, or the rejection of that conceptual baggage, or if we just accept old strategies, articulations, and formulations of programs and principles that are all downstream from the critique itself, we might want that might fuck up our whole plan, and it might make us look cartoonishly stupid to people who are not in our context, who do not share our assumptions, who haven't read what we've read. And I'm currently not too worried about outsiders looking in. I'm not trying to speak to people who I'm not actually in conversation with. This is me hanging out with 50 people right now. That's the way I see it. I know exactly who those 50 people are. Okay, but I'm not at the point yet where I need to talk to a popular audience, but I can tell you for fuck's sure they can't talk to a popular audience. And the thing is Bakunin and Marx had a fundamental disagreement about whether you can educate humanity and raise up its level and help humans actualize their full capacities. Bakunin thought only after the revolution, which has to be led not from above, but from behind. He believed in a secret vanguard, a secret society. He said, 200 or 300 people is all we need. And Marx was like, no, it's going to be a very long struggle that requires people in developed capitalism beginning to see through capitalism, okay? And then it's going to require a long struggle and a lot of education. And not the kind of education where you go, hey, this is how it works. Now recite. Say it back to me. No, not that kind of education. That's what people think education means for the last 100 years. That's not what education is. Education is trying to do the shit that we're trying to do right now. And it's not really been happening. Okay? What you have is secret societies of people who think that they have it all figured out, and now they need to guide the revolutionary subjectivity, however they define that. And then people who say, actually, no, we won't hide behind the scenes. We'll step forward and we'll take the power ourselves, and then we'll lead the revolution, which is how Marxism turns into small-time Vanguardism. Okay? And when Marxism becomes small-time Vanguardism, where everything's to be done by professional revolutionaries, you're just bacooning, but you're not hiding behind the scenes anymore. Okay? And all the Bolsheviks are going to be like, shut the fuck up, Dave. You're full of shit. That's wrong. You're counter-revolutionary revisionist. How dare you? Okay, well, I think I've been doing the work enough now. If you fucking want to make a bunch of videos about it and take into account everything I've said here, I'll sign up for that class. I'll watch everything you have to say on the matter. But if it's just a bunch of this fucking stuck in the jargon reciting old fucking bullshit from 150 years ago, no! And so I ranted on Watcher the last time I publicly streamed on purpose. And if Watcher's still in the chat, I'm sorry. Because you're asking about, like, because you had suggested that I shouldn't get stuck in 100-year-old books. And I did the unsympathetic interpretation of that statement, and the sympathetic one is to say, yes, people really do get stuck in periods of time. There's a lot of people right now thinking that they're radical who are just LARPing from the 60s or 1917, and it's obvious to everyone outside of their circle. Okay, they're definitely stuck in a historical period. In fact, most of them are actual history buffs, and this is their thing. This is their niche of literature. Well, that's fine. And I also think that you have to get stuck in a period just to get deep in a period. And you have to put on someone else's shoes and walk for a few miles intellectually before you can really think it through inside and out. But if your intention is to stay there, like you found your people and now you've got it, well, it's a different kind of project than the kind of thing where you suspend all of the categories and presuppositions that everybody's using all around you, and you say, okay, what are the fundamental questions, values, and concerns that are upstream from how this all gets enshrined by some state ideology later on? There you go. What's going on in chat? Oh, here we go. Swolitarians all. Shut the fuck up, Dave. You're full of shit. That's counter-revolutionary and revisionist. How dare you? Mikey, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Yeah, Solitary said, center worker voices. Yeah, we can, that's the whole idpolization of labor thing that I got into in that last stream. But I want to do two quick things for the good of the order, Michael. I need to step away. And I need you to keep everyone entertained. And when I step away, I'm going to look at the chat. And I've got to call Anne and make sure that I don't have a dinner appointment in like a little bit. And I probably do, and I'll have to go. But, I want to go for at least another 20 minutes. But what I wanted to give you an opportunity to do while I step away is to share your story, because you haven't yet. And I know you say in the beginning of our Lacan lectures, oh, I'm not going to share the story. I've shared that a lot of times before. Well, at this point, most of my audience, though, and especially a lot of the New Civilization Publishing subscribers on our Substack, haven't been introduced to you properly. So just maybe talk a little bit about what got you into, on the one hand, philosophy, on the other side, some kind of leftism, and I'll be right back.
Sounds good. So, let's say, what got me into philosophy, I call it my existentialist epiphany. And it's weird. It sounds like some cinematic situation, something like you'd see in a movie. But when I woke up on my 21st birthday, somehow, for whatever reason, I woke in a very existentialist mode. And, I was sitting there. I got to thinking, I'm 21. I'm an adult now. So, I've never really thought much about different forms of religion or politics. I've never really thought much about anything. And I decided to go to Barnes and Noble and get philosophy books, because if you want to think deep thoughts, you read philosophy books. And so I get there and I'm looking around the philosophy section, and I get real upset because the one philosopher I'd heard of was Socrates, and they didn't have any Socrates books. And 21-year-old me was deeply disappointed and offended by this. So I went over to customer service, and the guy there, he was nice enough to explain Socrates didn't write books. It's, he's a character in Plato's dialogues. And so we go over to the philosophy section. He gets me some Plato, and also ended up getting Descartes' Meditations, and took those home. Excuse me. And started reading them. Basically couldn't understand a word in them. But something happened where I got hooked on philosophy, and I started going. The same week I went over to Borders. I miss Borders. I always thought Borders was a better bookstore than Barnes and Noble. But I went to Borders, and there were two people there that I ended up becoming friends with instantly, John and Callie. And these two really changed my life, because they were the first real artsy intellectual friends I ever had. And they both really liked philosophy. They were artists. John made music and made movies and wrote poetry and everything. And Callie was always doing artistic stuff, and very intellectual. They love foreign films and all that. So they really opened up a whole new world for me, and were kind of like, I felt like at the time I was like Plato, making my way through this hell of trying to, I mean, it was, in a sense, even though I love philosophy, it was a kind of hell, because trying to, at the time when I was 21, I was basically illiterate. I mean, I could read, but I couldn't open up a newspaper and make any sense of it. I couldn't follow it. And so these two really, really were like Virgil, leading me through this hell I found myself in. Just in a weird way, it's a good hell. But they started showing me, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, Nietzsche, he's a philosopher, he thinks this, he's about this. And they knew enough about each philosopher to help me understand like what I was getting into by reading them. And for the first couple of years, I would try to read Kant, I'd try to read Kierkegaard and Nietzsche, and I banged my head against the wall, and I had to basically learn to read, learn to study, to be able to understand any of it. But throughout this whole period, for whatever reason, philosophy became my passion, and it really took hold, and it's been my passion ever since. But yeah, that's how I got into philosophy. And then the thing with how did I get into leftism, which for me, it was primarily Marx. I mean, part of it was just my philosophical education, and it eventually led me to Marx. And I guess for me, what was strange is that I always had a basic anti-capitalism in me, despite the fact I was the perfect embodiment of a little consumer kid. I love the mall. I love the video store. I love the arcade. I mean, I'm one of these people. I have this extreme 80s nostalgia. I miss the old forms of consumerism. And I mean, shit, I'm writing a whole book about this. But at the same time, even though I was a mall rat and consumer kid, I always had a weird kind of anti-capitalist stance towards all of it. Like back then, I would have just said, I love all this stuff, but I know it's bullshit. And tucked inside of that was an anti-capitalist. And so when I discovered Marx, I mean, Marx was a huge turning point for me philosophically. I think I've had, let's see, maybe 4 or 5 big philosophical turning points. I mean, of course, there's just the initial getting into philosophy, but the first philosopher I discovered that I really, really loved was Kierkegaard. And again, at the time I was a Christian. I'd been raised a Baptist my whole life. And so there's that whole side of me that, you know, was a Christian since I was a kid. But with Kierkegaard, I found a whole different way of thinking about Christianity and its ramifications, and I loved this kind of Christian existentialism. Yeah, okay, Kierkegaard didn't use that term, but nonetheless, his work really, really resonated with me. Over the years, I became more and more distant from Christianity, primarily due to personal issues and not philosophical ones, even though there's plenty of philosophical reasons there too. But yeah, so for me, it was really Kierkegaard was the first philosopher I really connected to, and then the next one would have been Heidegger, because Read and Beat in Time, that one changed my life. There was no going back, because and Dave was talking about that. There's actually very few philosophers who create brand new theories of what it is to be a subject. Now, okay, he's going to use the term Dasein instead of subject, but I think to this day, Being in Time is one of the greatest books on human subjectivity. Forgive me, Heideggerians, for using the term, that's ever been written. It totally changes how you view what it is to be human. And I to this day, like, I mean, the impact that Being in Time had on me it's hard to rival it. But so yeah, there was Kierkegaard, and then there was Heidegger, and then the next big one was Marx. And Marx was where I finally started to discover, like, okay, I've had issues with capitalism my whole life. I've never been able to actually articulate what those issues are. And with Marx, he opened up this way for me to start to realize, like, okay, here's the issues I'm having with it. And it was primarily the first volume of Capital that I studied. Dave has far surpassed my understanding of Marx. Again, you know, Dave hasn't gone into it much on the channel, but trust me, as somebody who talks to Dave all the time, the work he's done the last year to 6 months to a year is really, really impressive. And so, but for me, Marx was primarily Marx of Capital, Volume 1. And that book was like Being in Time. It changed everything. And from then on, then, you know, the other thinkers on the left that really appealed to me, Baudrillard, you know, I'm some kind of Baudrillardian now. Obviously, Zizek. And then, I mean, the other one, like Debord, Bourdieu. I mean, I studied Althusser. I learned something important from all of them. But yeah, I mean, it basically me becoming some sort of a leftist, whatever that is now, really stems from reading Marx. And so in that way, he forever changed my life. And then the other two that are probably the biggest game changers for me were Baudrillard and Zizek. And to this day, I mean, you say, like, what kind of thinker am I? I would say I'm some sort of I'm a Baudrillardian Zizekian, which probably makes me the only one on planet Earth. But that's kind of the theoretical framework I'm working in right now, while at the same time having a fidelity to Marx, insofar as I still think the fundamental, like the core issues we as human beings are facing are capital, the commodity form, wage labor. I mean, that's why Dave's concept of time energy appeals so much to me. I mean, that's my whole thing is I want my time energy. I want to be able to have control and the ability to distribute my time energy as I please. And I think, honestly, this sort of temporal energetic freedom is a huge aspect of what it is to be free. capitalism dictates and structures our everyday life through imposing this temporal structure on it. And for me, I mean, that's what Dave has added so much to this, which early on, like I was really inspired by Adorno's. Adorno has this great short essay on free time, and what Adorno does is he shows that capitalism actually takes all of our time and controls it, even though it, to use a Baudrillardian term, it seems to simulate like we get some free time, but we never actually get free time. And so I understood that capitalism imposes a form of temporal oppression on us, that we don't have our time in a meaningful way. But Dave figured out, like, no, energy is also absolutely essential to this. And everyday language bears this out. We always talk about, I don't have the time or the energy to do this. But what Dave has figured out is like, no, time is energy. Energy is time. Like, you don't really have your time without your energy, and you really don't have your energy without your time. And so this concept has, I mean, it's had a huge influence on me too. And I just haven't written anything about it yet, because obviously Dave just got book out and everything. And so I wasn't going to mention it before the book was out, but I mean, no, I mean, it's changed how I view things, very much so. And I'm looking forward to doing my own thing and, you know, being inspired by Dave's concept, seeing what I can do with it eventually. I know I'm going to end up writing something on it at some point.
Oh, shucks. Thank you for
Amazing.
Thank you for saying nice things about me. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Are we good? Am I back?
Yeah,
So,
I ran through I did the Barnes & Noble story, and then talked about how I got into being some kind of leftist.
yeah, and I guess the last thing is, look, Michael's not going to say it, so I'll just say it. He spent 15 years reading philosophy for 6 hours every day because he could. And the two of us come from very different backgrounds.
Oh, is that the story I was supposed to? I didn't know.
It's the funny part you leave out. That's all. It's just like it's like the skeleton backbone of the whole thing. Because like I feel like I could have listened to you say all that stuff, and then at the end of it all, been like, oh, okay, so you're a philosophy buff, cool. But that doesn't, like, we met off of the Partially Examined Life philosophy page or group or whatever, and there's a lot of people in there doing philosophy by asking dumb questions, and you know, when teachers say that there's no such thing, that they're trying to be nice. Anyway, there's a lot of stupid questions, and people just and people try to play gadfly and be antagonistic and debate me, bro, and like there's all this stuff that people do. Like there's just archetypical like freshman to sophomore. What's that?
What if God is really a spaghetti monster?
Yeah, basically. And so, you know, like there's this one person who's like, you should just add people that are in groups that you think are interesting, and it'll make your Facebook experience way better. And actually, I think it made my Facebook experience way worse. In the next 7 years could be talked about in terms of that was a bad experiment. But the cool thing that came out of it was Mikey. And so we brought him to Boise State to give a talk on Baudrillard one time. Why did I bring someone who doesn't have the academic credentials to speak on something? And why did a lot of professors show up to listen to Michael? More importantly, why do we get reports from all over the country and abroad that people are using Michael's blog posts in graduate classroom sessions? This is the part that no one's going to tell you about, or that Mikey's not going to say himself, because he's not going to stroke his own ego. But it's just like 6 hours a day reading the hardest thinkers in the history of ideas, and doing so at your own leisure, following your own interests.
Because I had the time, energy.
No economic necessity. So what happened to that? Why don't you have time, energy now?
Well, so basically my mom owned a dance studio, and I helped out there. And a dance studio is not open very many hours during the day. And because of that, I mean, and I started working for the family business, which is her business. when I was 18. And from 18 to 38, that's what I did. I helped her out, helped run the business. And we, Great Recession, and then she has bad health problems, and I can help out run the business side of it, but I can't teach dance. Long story short, we lose the dance studio, and I am thrown into actual wage labor for the first time in my life, which makes me a kind of a weird anomaly, right? My first real job is when I'm 38. And but you know what? There's something great in that. There's something great in, even though I absolutely hate it. I absolutely despise wage labor. It's probably the thing I hate most in life. And I felt that way before I had to do it. I knew what it did to everybody around me, and I knew how lucky I was to be able to have my time and energy to do with as I felt. And it revealed to me, like, the sharp contrast for me. Like, I got an experience of this that most people never get. Like, I get how absolutely horrible it is and how it just imposes itself on every aspect of your life. And like, as a person, no, I wish I'd never fucking had to do this, and I wish nobody else had to do it. But as a theorist, it also has helped me, because I'm able to be able to experience it in a way that a lot of people haven't.
Right.
And it's worse than most people know. Like, they don't, I think, because that old analogy of, like, if you put a frog in a pot on the stove and you turn the heat up very slowly, the frog won't jump out. Right. But if you throw the frog into a pot of boiling water, it immediately jumps out.
Right.
Like, I feel like that's been what I've gotten from being just thrown into wage labor in my middle of my life, in a way that everybody hates their fucking job. All you have to do is ask somebody how, what's the worst thing about their job, and they'll just go and go and go. But because everybody has had to do that
for so long,
their whole life, they've just, in a sense, by their middle of their life, they just accept it as the way it is.
Toughen up, Buttercup. Yeah.
And here's the thing. I just will never accept it as the way it is. Not for myself, but also not for anybody else. And I make no bones about it. There's many, many different ways we can talk about what freedom is. But one key element is being able to have control over the majority of your time energy. That's part of what freedom is. And if you don't get to, and that's what I think having a passion is. I don't believe capitalism allows people to have passionate lives, because actually having a passion for something, it's something you want to wake up and get out of bed and go do every day, that requires time energy. That requires the ability to have control over the vast majority of the time in your week where you can repeat this activity enough to refine it and get better at it. And I know for me, working in a fucking warehouse doesn't cut it.
Right.
Doing philosophy does, but I don't get that anymore the way I did.
The closest your average consumer subjectivity as a worker gets to the feeling of accomplishment that comes through self-actualization from honing a set of skills in a way that gives you socially objectified recognition for achievements is video games, because that's what it simulates. So video games simulate that shit, and I love them, but at the same time, it's for most people not gonna cut it, and so most people try a lot of different things, and sometimes those things kill them, and it's really sad. And I don't judge. And so the humanist, the essential humanist aspect of the project, and I guess I'm going to start using that word because it's a word that people use when they focus on this aspect of the project. But the humanist thread that gets lost from the values, questions, and concerns of young Marx that found the entire critique of political economy and what comes later is for me it can be mostly found at the idea that the humans have capacities, but those capacities can lay dormant and go to waste, which means that there is this whole, this liberal notion, be yourself, find a job that gives you meaning, you'll give back some, then you'll be able to consume and eventually die. Well, there's a lot of things left out of that picture. And
okay, see, this is where I'm actually getting worked out. You want me to be my fucking best self, capitalism? Good. Give me money and no fucking wage labor.
Yeah.
That's what I do then. There, I'll follow your fucking ideological demand to the fucking letter. You want me to personalize? You want me to be the best version of myself? Good. Fucking pay me to not work. Fuck wage labor.
Yeah.
And I don't give a fuck. Like, I can't be objective about this shit.
Yeah. And
no.
I just went off.
It's a form of ideological tool. Oh, be your best self, but have no fucking time and energy to fucking or money to do anything that could actually further your potential. Fuck off.
And what happens when those capacities go unexplored and undeveloped? By the way, and people would think, oh, well, you can have a hobby. Okay, well, my book basically lays out why that's not possible.
I don't want a fucking hobby. I want a passion.
I want a passion. And so I don't know.
I don't want a consolation prize. I want freedom.
Yeah, exactly. And look, everybody, we got to cut this off really soon here. I got to start closing out. And the main thing that I want to implore you that if you got anything out of this, you owe me a comment in the comment section of the actual video, not the live stream, later after the fact. You do. Give it to me. You owe it to me. If you don't, you're robbing me. Don't fucking rob me. I'll come down. If I swear to God, there's been at least 17 of you. If I don't have 17 fucking comments, I'm going to track you down. If Izul doesn't comment on the actual video, I'm just kidding. I'm joking. But anyway, you get the idea. Please, for the fucking love of God, everyone's out of the habit of engaging on things. It's killing me. If you're tired and sick with COVID and you're watching on a smart TV and you can't get into the comment sections because of that, I understand. But if that is not your fucking situation, get down there. And I don't think you can while it's live right now, but you can later. Just do it. Come back. Coming back over this stuff will help you come up with figuring out how to say the thing that you were trying to think about maybe saying earlier. I promise.
Just come back and write, God bless Daddy Marx.
Yeah, there you go. God bless Daddy Marx. Fuck wage labor and free Mikey.
Oh, there we go. That's better.
Free Mikey. Hashtag free Mikey. And I'm putting this up on the screen now. You've probably seen these because I think that they're in the meme role that I've been doing. Oh, whoops. Hold on. That one's not complete. So we have the one here that's very big, Free Mikey. And then we've got another one. Where is it? Oh, I'll have to find it later. There's another. I made 2 Free Mikey memes. We'll just leave this one up for now, and I'm going to talk about it for a second. So anyone who gets my letters from theoryplebe.com should know that I've been torn in a lot of directions and trying to figure out what to do. And one of the things I alluded to is the idea that since I know that I can work part-time...
I'm sorry, this is funny. This is the first time I saw it.
Oh, you just saw it? Trapped Dasein. Are you trapped in the prison of language? Is that where... No, it's wage labor.
I'm fine being lost in the big other, the symbolic order, whatever. I can deal with that. Fucking wage labor I can't fucking cope with. So...
Michael has a symbolic debt to a system that gave him ultimate consumer advantage. He was able to enjoy really good food and wear cool shoes and not have to work. And he eventually got into philosophy, and he spent 6 hours a day doing it.
But I also grew up in a little shitty... It's weird. It's a weird kind of paradox.
Well, I'm not trying to oust you as privileged. What I'm trying to say is that you've got a perspective and experience that means that with your blog already where it is, with the lecture interviews being where they already are, we already know people find it so helpful because for that entire time that you were doing that, you were surrounded by the people you just referenced. Shitty town, shitty deteriorating town. And your friends and connections in that shitty deteriorating town, as they were all going out of business over time. All those people who you had associations with, and all the people you saw move out of the town and try and fail elsewhere, you've continued to communicate with them all, and your standard for a litmus test that you hold to yourself for whether you can understand a text or not is, can you explain the concept you're reading about to a drunk dude on a bar stool? And if you can't, you don't understand it yet, and so you get back to the books and you just keep working at it until you fucking get it. And so we've got like this, there's that meme, Tell me, explain Deleuze to me or I'll fucking kill you. What's the body without...
That's a good name. Yeah.
What's the body without organs? Well, the fact is nobody online can do it. I've tried to read people trying to do it. They just can't. Michael does it. He's done it for me a lot of times. And more importantly, he can do it with...
I just haven't written that out as a blog post, but...
I mean, I think it is in your anti-Oedipus notes somewhat. It's just not...
To some degree, but what I mean is, like, there's the whole... I guess it's technically called a plateau. The chapter in 1,000 Plateaus devoted entirely to the body without organs. That's where I have to go to do this.
And the two of us cast shade on Deleuze or Guattarians all the time. Just so you know, that's because you can't love them as a collectivity. You can only love them individually. And so there are ones that we love individually, and we love them despite the fact that they are Deleuze or Guattarians. We love Deleuze and Guattari as well. So it's not that we don't love them. It's just that
they're frenemies to me. Like, as a Lacanian Zizekian.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, Deleuze is absolutely fucking brilliant. Like, I mean, difference in repetition alone. If that's all that guy had written, I can't. I mean, in 2 seconds, I can't. The emphasis on intensity. That is. He changed metaphysics. Like it was right there waiting to be pointed out. But like, hello, actuality is transcendentally structured by intensity. Like, and I won't try to unpack that now. I'm just saying, like, even though I'm a kind of some Lacanian Zizekian, which is supposed to make me stand at odds with Deleuze and Guattari, which it does in certain ways, I still like. First off, Deleuze and Guattari, without a doubt, wrote the two coolest philosophy books ever written. Like, you can't match them on that. I just disagree with... I disagree with their theory of desire, basically, and as a Lacanian. But their philosophical brilliance is, I mean, I still...
Okay, we just have to do this because we have a lot of them in our lives. All right, so, look... What I'm trying to say is, I've come to the realization that trying to free myself from wage labor was a mistake. That trying to be an influencer I wasn't trying to be an influencer, but you take on the role if you play the algorithmic game the way that you're supposed to and do the Patreon the way you're supposed to or encouraged to. And so I played along with it until I felt embarrassed. And the fact is it was after freeing myself from the sort of weird obligations to strangers that I was feeling and then just working on my own, and I realized I could work on my own, support myself, and listen to audiobooks because I've developed this capacity to listen to a lot of the kinds of books that we've been talking about, and I actually like working with my hands, and I'm for a society where I only have to work for a few days a week with my hands and I can listen to audiobooks. I'm fine with that future. I would sign up for that future. And so Amazon lets you have 3 12-hour days in a row. You can have one earbud in and you can just match colors is all you're doing. I don't know if they'll hire me or not. We'll see. But I'm going to try. And the point is, jobs like that, or the chainsawing job that I've been doing, these kinds of manual jobs where you can kind of focus on the brainy stuff apart from what you were doing with your hands once you've got it down and you know what you're doing. Those kinds of jobs I am totally fine with doing for the next 3 to 10 years. I expect that in the future, if I'm a parent, in the future, if I have an injury or anything like that, I won't be able to work with my hands the same way anymore. I'll have to figure something out at that point. But for the time being, I'm fine with the main work that I've done my whole life, which is manual wage labor. I'm fine for now because I see a bigger picture where there's a way out. And before I get to that point, Michael's older than I am and is in a situation where he's supporting his mom, so he can't just opt out or take a lower paying or a fewer days in the week kind of job. We know exactly what he needs to make in order to survive. And so the idea is that we could free Mikey from waged labor, that's not extreme, that's not a crazy idea, and that if we do that, then he would have the time to do monthly office hours where he answers people's questions. He'd be able to respond to people's invitations to join things sometimes, maybe, who knows. He would actually finish his book. In fact, he's got like 20 other books that he's working on, and he's got like 100 other blog posts. And it's all stuff that when I listen to it, I understand it, and that's dangerous. I can listen to it double speed and understand some of it, and then I tell him what I think I heard, and he says, "No, you fucking idiot, you missed it. You missed the whole point." And then I go back over listening to it again, and then I get it. And so that accelerates my development and saves me 15 years of doing it for 6 hours every day. Okay? And if it's helping me in that situation, then it can help people who are driving trucks. It can help people who are stocking shelves. It can help people who are doing construction. And it can help people who are driving around or laying sick in bed with COVID. So no matter...
I want to say, if he is listening, he's a former coworker of mine at the warehouse. What's up, Ari? He's out there. He's a semi-truck driver now, and he's out there, and he said he's going to listen to the stream.
He said he was going to listen. What's up, Ari? How you doing? I love this kind of content for driving. I love driving jobs. I almost got a CDL last year, and if I'd known that I was going to keep living in Idaho, I would have got the CDL when I had the chance. But oh well, I thought I was moving somewhere else. Anyway, so back on track. I want to close this out, and I just want to say that we're going to do it, and we're going to pool our resources, and we're going to get look. All it would take is 3,000 people giving $1 each every month to his Patreon. He doesn't have a Patreon yet. He will by Wednesday. Okay? He'll also have a few books out through New Civilization Publishing this year. Those are the only promises I'm making. There's a lot of other promises I want to tell you about, but I'm going to keep it simple and baseline. I can promise you, if you got anything out of this conversation, there's better shit to come. And in fact, we didn't even scratch the surface, because honestly,
we didn't actually even get to my questions, and that's fine because you had to lay a context. And
I have 50 pages of stuff that gets into the symbolic and structural and the arguments within the field and look, it's a lot. And I'm putting every waking moment of my life into this, and I honestly don't ask for anything in return anymore. But I am going to start saying we need to free Mikey. So thank you for joining, everybody. I've got to get to a dinner now. Michael, seriously, thank you for joining.
No, we got to do another one of these soon, because I want to go more into a conversational form. Again, you've worked so much at this, you have to lay a context, and you'll probably have to expand that context as we go. But there's so much more we can do just on the topic of Marxism.
Yeah. Also, by the way, I said I'm curious to know Epiphany, and what I meant by I'm curious, I want to hear more about this post-colonial thing you said you were up to. So send me an email if you want to chat about it. Anyway. Yeah. Oh, Watcher says, he was a free man, then he got into philosophy. Now his life is ruined.
Hold on. So I will say philosophy obviously got, integrated into my death drive, and I'm fine with. Like, if it's a form of enjoyment that destroyed my life, I still wouldn't take that back. I think, I'm not joking, I think a lot of us get into philosophy and art, these things that capitalist society, you can't make a living doing them. I don't think it's a coincidence that these types of things that are the most enjoyable, being a musician, being an artist, being a philosopher, are the most enjoyable when chances are you can't make a living doing them.
Right. Which was why I've thought so hard about what is philosophy and why are people so against it. It's why my intro to philosophy stream is titled, How Dare You Study Philosophy? It's because on
some level, it's the idea that philosophy is going to steal your enjoyment. I mean, again, I'm talking like your typical Zizekian here, but there's forms in, like, people on an unconscious level at least understand that their basic forms of enjoyment depend on the overarching structure of their society. If we go tinkering around with the presuppositions or the basic principles of that society, we can steal their enjoyment from them.
Right.
I think we can think in terms of the theft of enjoyment is why Socrates had to drink the hemlock.
And it's also why so many people would rather have very small wins in battles. They'd rather have just as many, if not more, defeats and small wins than actually ever do something that would actually better everyone's situation. And it's because they want to see their enemy suffer. And they're willing to sacrifice to see their enemies suffer. And Bernie was a perfect example of it. It brought it out. It brought it out into the fucking, like, all these people who are totally fine with some socialist-y rhetoric, the moment he comes out and says, it's for everybody, it's going to be good, everyone will get along, we'll do it, this is for everybody, and he was doing a universalist, populist kind of lefty approach in 2016, they lost their shit because they don't like the fact that he's good at talking to Fox News viewers.
All right, well, I'm gonna do the joke, right? The Zizek joke, which is a genie appears to a guy, says, hey, I'm going to give you the ability to have a wish granted. I'm going to grant whatever you wish. But here's the stipulation. Whatever you wish for, I'm going to do that double to your neighbor. And the guy sits there for a minute and he thinks, and then he looks at the genie and he says, take one of my eyes.
Right. Which is
because the idea is
yes.
He's going to get more enjoyment from his neighbor losing both eyes than him being deprived of one eye.
Exactly.
Because his enjoyment is in hurting his neighbor, or his neighbor losing his enjoyment.
And I used to think that's so cynical until I started really thinking about how I get off on how stupid my enemies are. And then I was like, okay, now I need to stop. This is just childish now. All right. Folks, go sign up for NSP's newsletter. That's how you'll find out the strategies we're going to develop moving forward, where the rest of these conversations will happen. They won't always be on my channel. And there will be special access to subscribers for non-public conversations. And sometimes you'll even get a chance to send in your own voice messages and ask questions, and we'll read your emails and stuff like that. It's coming. It's coming. We're going to do it. Anyway, love you all. Hope you have a good night. Mikey, thanks for joining. All right, everybody.
Yep.
Take care. I'm a half hour late. Goodbye.
Bye.